Kenmore City Council is now in session. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Culver,
Present.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Sassen. Here. Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Councilmember Burgess,
Here.
Councilmember O'Kane, Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Here.
Mayor Herbig,
Here.
all present.
Next on the agenda is our land acknowledgement. Excuse me. We acknowledge that the city of Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Soxhawtl, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish peoples. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the First Peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working towards the future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land. Now, if you'd all please stand and join me in the flag salute.
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Unless there are any objections, the agenda will stand approved as published. Hearing no objections, the agenda is approved. Next, we have a presentation recognizing Alanafe Matinda, a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Advisory Committee member presented by Assistant to the City Manager and DEIA Coordinator Garrett Oppenheim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've been fortunate enough to have had Alanafe Matende, or Nafe, to those of us who've gotten to work with him over the years, on the DEIA Advisory Committee for the last few years. And it's very appropriate for the City Council to recognize him tonight as he departs from the committee. Nafe has been a member of the committee for several years now, ever since it was created from the DEIA task force. And ever since he's been a very active member of the committee, answering questions from staff, volunteering at events, and contributing invaluable insights at committee meetings. Not only that, but he also served on the Financial Sustainability Task Force this year. And just last month, he was kind enough to come and judge our pumpkin decorating contest for the year. I think it's pretty apparent that Nafe has earned a break, so I don't hold it against him that he'll be committing his free time to other endeavors for a while. But I do suspect that at some point in the future, he'll answer the call and perform some further civic duties down the line. So thank you for your service on the DEIA committee, Nafe.
Do we want to invite, do you want to come up and say a few words, or do you want to get a picture with the council? Or? Yeah, that'd be great.
No, I'd just like to thank Rob and Garrett, for bringing me on board. It was a really good time. We're also on the Financial Stability Planning Committee. No, I just love being part of the city and, contributing where we can. So thank you very much.
Well, we really appreciate you giving back. And then let's just do a quick photo with the council. I've got a certificate for you to thank you for your service. So. Mr. City Manager, where's the fun?
Well, this may not sound like fun because last week we had a pretty big windstorm, and there were people that were without power for days. There were some straggler pockets that didn't get power even until yesterday. But this neighborhood in the northwest part of the city, they got their power on Saturday night. So on Sunday, they decided to hold a dead freezer potluck. So, they had their freezers that were thawing out, and they realized they probably couldn't refreeze the stuff, but it was probably still good enough to eat. So they all cooked up their stuff in their freezer and had a neighborhood dead freezer potluck. It was hosted at Russ and Carol Johnson's house. In this next picture, here are the neighbors all enjoying the dead freezer potluck together. So just a little power outage love note.
Trying to make some lemonade out of lemons. Next on our agenda is public comment. We want to welcome everybody to the council's meeting. We ask you to address your comments to the mayor and council. Folks will get 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will call your name when it is your turn. Please state your name and city of residence and keep within the allotted time to make every person feel welcome and safe here. Please refrain from booing, clapping, heckling, yelling, or other interruptions. The meeting is recorded for transparency. Thank you for being here and for sharing your input respectfully. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Herbig. We have 7 guests on site wishing to speak, followed by Stacy Valenzuela online. Janet Hayes, Patrick O'Brien, Nathan McDonald, and Maria Hudson. We'll hear from you first.
Hi, my name is Janet Hayes and I'm a resident of Kenmore. And we have a power problem in Kenmore. Our power came on last night at 10:30. In 2016, the decision to stay with PSE was made. And we were assured that no more outages would occur and everything had been fixed. Time to go back to the table. We are dealing with more growth, more traffic, more development. Where are the, I can't read my own writing. More traffic, more development. The abundant. Okay, a minute. The amount of citizens here should give us pause. Our little town has become a city without any idea what is happening at the city hall. We have decisions being made that will change our landscape, and you, the governing body, have a great responsibility where you sit, elected for and by the people. I know a city our size should be electing its mayor. No offense, Nigel. I know that it is how we grow. Now the city manager is in charge. We have to upgrade our governing. The community will realize they are part of where they live. Give us a vote, give us more power. I thought that was a good little thing. Thank you.
Pat O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. I'll give myself a applause here real fast. Way to go, pat on the back. Okay, good. Where are the funds? Well, where was the electricity? I mean, we've read the articles, looked up the old Kenmore reporter. Oh, city of Kenmore insists on hardened electrical grid. Oh yeah, it's happened. It won't happen like it did, for 8 days. No, it was only 6 this time. And what happened? I had neighbors across the street all go to hotels, both apartment buildings. My neighbor down the street lost thousands of dollars of her medication, Ambril and all these very expensive medications thrown away. I was the recipient of everybody's freezer dilemmas, and I made the biggest pot of dog chili you ever saw on a grill. But, I was one of the prepared people, and I would have been more prepared had I been able to have my solar panel and the backup batteries and all the things that I spent $60,000 on and the city had me take down. So you need to reanalyze if you're helping or slowing down the green energy. You've slowed it down in the past, and that was prior to Rob Carlindsey being here, so I don't blame it on him. But seriously, people wandering around in the dark, falling down, going to the hospital is all part of this energy thing that just happened to us. And it wasn't that bad. We've seen worse storms, but Puget Sound Energy has farmed out the responsibility of repairing all the lines to a national company out of state. A lot of this stuff had to be trucked in, the poles, the wire, the crews. And the fact is that Puget Sound Energy can still take our money and they don't have to repair anything because it's contracted out. And you ought to look into that because that's a real problem. In Kenmore, we were out, the people to the east of us had power. This Kenmore Village had power. Uplake had power. 182nd had power. 522 had power. And 72 of us sat there in the dark till last night at 8:30. And this is all supposedly on a hardened grid. So that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. The other thing that we need to do is make sure that we hire a competent commercial realtor. You don't have a realtor on staff. I recommend Stan Eisenhath, who lives over in Arrowhead. He's trustworthy. He's a good guy. He can steer you right. You are going into land deals where you don't have feasibility set up the right way. You're not using the forms, boilerplate forms, the boilerplate forms that the multiple uses and the commercial brokers association use. Thank you.
Nathan McDonald, followed by Maria Hudson.
Nathan McDonald, Kenmore citizen. If we have learned anything from the past week, it is that electricity is right up there with air, water, and food as a necessity to sustain modern life. Our grid is the crucial distribution network for this necessity. I therefore highly recommend the council and anyone else listening read Shorting the Grid, The Hidden Fragility of Our Electric Grid, written by Meredith Angwin, spelled Angwin, a grandmother and chemist by trade who lives in Vermont. You will see for yourself how the past week's struggles came to be and what possibilities can remedy these shortcomings. Contrary to today's Seattle Times article, the solution is not an unabated push for renewables, everyone plugging their electric vehicle into the grid, or the deployment of grid state batteries, a concept that does not yet exist in mass production. Have you ever asked yourself why a proof of concept community powered exclusively by wind, solar, and hydro does not exist in the United States? And this is the untested future that you insist we must embrace. Nor is the solution the city's climate action plan, which opposes diversity of energy source by penalizing natural gas use. And I thought the city was all in on diversity. This despite the majority of voters in our state insisting that natural gas must remain a consumer choice for heating and other uses, including power generation. Your approach to complex problems, be it housing affordability or climate action, is to simply reduce the problem to a question of will. In other words, if you decree it, it will be so. You can pretend to yourselves that this will solve your claimed myriad of problems, but as Philip K. Dick wrote, reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. Your performative approach to the challenges that face the city and its residents becomes clearer every day, with the endless thank yous to those in city administration who present you with the latest plan to increase spending with little to show for it. You are in love with the process itself rather than the results that it is your job to deliver. The grift goes on.
Thank you. Maria Hudson, followed by Elizabeth Mooney, Tracy Benishinsky, David Dorian, and Stacy Valenzuela.
Hi, my name is Maria Hudson. My daughter goes for a child forensic sexual exploitation interview this Wednesday. Kenmore Police Department has been participating in obstructing me keeping my daughter safe. When I come here because we're unhoused and she stays at her uncle's house. Today, with a letter that they saw from my doctor that I am a disabled parent of an autistically aggressive child, they refused to do an involuntary treatment hold, left her with me, did not do a standby, and my daughter pulled my hair out and they still didn't respond. I'm standing here because of color of law crimes. I am back and forth with Chief Moen, who continues to obstruct healthcare, safety, and any response to at all. The officers came today and told me they don't like the way that I treat them, so they refuse to do a standby. What is imperative is that with regard to my daughter's child sex trafficking, she's a vulnerable child under the statute for autism, developmental delays, learning. Your officers won't respond. When they do respond, they racketeer our rights. They say the most disgusting things to me as an unhoused African-American single Black mother of an autistic child. And ask yourself this question. If your child is having an autistic tantrum and you are white, if you call for medical assistance for an involuntary treatment hold because they're suicidal, and I will submit documents, would you appreciate officers coming to you lying intentionally saying, what's the argument? What's the altercation? You need to teach your officers not to violate public accommodation laws, unbiased policing. Autism is not an argument because we're African-American. Autistic aggression, which is diagnosed, is not an altercation between a Black mother and child. They have said the most and dehumanized us in the most disgusting ways. I'm presently in federal court against Bellevue Police Department and King County Housing Authority. Your officers will be named in a 1983 claim because they have been nothing short of disgusting and harmful, okay? And it's of greater concern to me that my daughter's father, okay, is an civilly adjudicated rapist who lives at the house that my daughter stays at, has no parental rights. Your officers have been so dehumanizing. I should not have to litigate for safety. I'm a DEI expert and political science and social scientist from the University of Washington. And my father's retired supervisor warrants for the city of Seattle. I'm a cop's kid.
Thank you.
Your officers should not be acting this way.
Elizabeth Mooney. Ms. Mooney, go on.
I just wanted everybody to have full attention for that woman ahead of us. It's important. So I'm here to say thank you because you had the city hall open for our PERC meeting. And thank you for doing that. And the staff was amazing, all of them. Some attended by virtual. So anyway, thank you. Rob Carlinzi came in. There was a family of Persian family that came that we met. I mean, there's a lot of people were out of power. Okay, so I'm just gonna fast forward. That was a little bit emotional. So I want you to, that was more important than what I was gonna say. Although I do wanna say that because of the meetings with Riley and Nina came and we talked about some of our important points, we're gonna reschedule. Jennifer said that we could reschedule, which is great. And the citizen that came had really important questions and a lot of focus with the staff. But here's one of our biggest problems that I think, I talked to Jim Howard before coming here. We want to be, as a nonprofit, submitting some ideas for your comp plan December 2nd. And hopefully you'll waive the fee for that so that you can get important comments about things like green factor. And, but the park and ride, what came up is that in the future, I know we did the whole Laris project, but you've got something that you can focus on now so that we prevent the trees that are at the park and ride, because Sound Transit, the way we understood it from talking to Riley and getting clarifications at some of our with our people is that right now, the way that you changed the exceptional tree ordinance, because Sound Transit is going to potentially put up residential buildings at the park and ride, that means that you are going to have a whole bunch of those giant trees, which the herons depend upon, and the eagles. You have kind of screwed it up. So, sorry, but I think you did. And I think you can get a second chance because it was so complicated, and I appreciate what you did. We've even gotten the okay to talk to the developer for Lara. So that's a done deal. We're going to get SEPA comments in. Thank you. But can we please talk about getting it right before Sound Transit builds their building for people? It's not against affordable housing, but we need to protect the trees that are at least at that park and ride, not the ones in the critical area in the critical area zone ordinance. We know those are protected, but it's the ones that are not in that region. So let's work on that together at the next meeting. And I think it's complicated, but I think we could get it right so that we don't accidentally kill some trees at that park and ride. That would feel really, really bad. And you have the power, and PERC will have more meetings, so I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy Benishinsky and David Dorian.
Tracy Banishinsky, Kenmore. I am here to invite you to opt outside this Friday, November 29th, the day after Thanksgiving. That day, one of your many options for being outside includes Wallace Swamp Creek Park, where you can join me and whoever else shows up between 11 and 2 for habitat restoration. This day happens to be the 5th anniversary of the restoration project, a Snow King Watershed Council all-volunteer production, generously supported by the city of Kenmore. And I would be pleased to celebrate with any of you. Because I believe it is important to be grounded in one's roots, I would like to remember with you that the project was born of an idea shared by me, now Deputy Mayor Melanie O'Kane, and community member Linda Phillips. Because I believe it is important to honor struggle, I would like to remember with you that we've experienced many challenges over the past 5 years, including but not limited to global pandemic, wildfire smoke, the discovery of an historic garbage dump, and the vagaries of weather that's becoming more extreme with climate change. Because I believe that it is important to build third places, I'm pleased to share with you that I think we've done just that. People have come sometimes just once, sometimes week after week for a season or more, and sometimes every single time for all those 5 years. And I'll let you guess who that was. Not just to do something good for the earth, but to find a place where everyone can be in community and belong. I'm mindful about making the barriers to participation low in this project. We don't require that people RSVP. We provide tools, gloves, snacks, and water. People can come anytime during our event window and leave when they need to. I will sign your participation form without question, whether you need it for Honor Society or court or something else. I make sure that we have gloves for the littlest hands and that parents know those hands are just as valuable to our project playing as they are working. I describe the work we have in front of us at each event, and people are encouraged to choose the task most suited to their abilities and desires. Sometimes we don't do things right. A blackberry root breaks, leaving a piece in the ground, or a beneficial plant is injured. But we show up with integrity, and we are accountable to each other and to the earth we are tending. We have built something really special these past 5 years, and I'm really proud of us. I heard the conversation last week about potential additions to the city's official legislative priorities, and I understand that the conversation will continue during the council member report section of your agenda tonight. I hope that you will be mindful as you discuss these policy additions, that you weigh and judge them by how close they might get us to a community where everyone is welcome and can belong. Are they putting up barriers or creating opportunities? Are they inclusive and just? These are important questions that I am attempting to answer every time I have a work party, and I hope that you will attempt to answer them tonight mindfully and not just reflexively. Thank you very much. Hope to see you on Friday.
Thank you, David Dorian, followed by Stacy Valenzuela.
David Dorian, Kenmore, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. I am confused. What I heard last week, quite clearly introduced as a protest against preemption by the state, is now reframed on your agenda as facilitators of affordable housing. If the components of the motion are about facilitating affordable housing, have we vetted them with our advisor, Arch, as sound examples of housing policy for Kenmore? Has Arch told us that despite the evidence of their own quarterly reports and the Housing Trust Fund reports from Commerce, that there are not funding pools for smaller scale or scattered site affordable housing? If that's the case, then have we confirmed with our partners such as NUSA that a focus on small scale developments is what is needed to alleviate the suffering of our local community members? That contrary to demographics, we actually don't need to provide affordable housing at scale? If we have done all of these things, then why have we not gone the expected further step and included these findings in the adequate provisions section of our housing element? If those are truly barriers to production locally, why would we not share them with the Department of Commerce via the mechanism designed for sharing them? Why instead would we instruct a lobbyist to lobby for policy that is not contained in our housing element, risking appearing inconsistent to state by doing so? I have to be honest, I think the reason for focusing on our lobbyist is because the proposed motion is not really about facilitating affordable housing. It is rather still a response to a perceived slight by state and county officials over our first attempt at a permanent supportive housing project. If that's the case, and also given the existing statement about preemption in our legislative agenda, I'm left wondering who this new lobbying is for. Is it for the very small percentage of our community who still want to stick it to state in news articles, to focus more on rewriting the narrative about Kenmore's contribution to affordable housing than to actually producing affordable housing? Because Kenmore voters voted overwhelmingly for our local state reps and Bob Ferguson at the recent elections. There is no evidence that there is a strong desire in our community to stick it to state over housing policies. Rather, the majority of our Kenmore community continue to support candidates aligned with the state's affordable housing policies. Rather than granting a hollow victory to the small section of our community that care about playing games in the media, I would ask that you focus instead on the large section of our community that needs affordable housing at scale. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacey Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We hear you. Go on.
Thank you. Stacey Valenzuela Kenmore, and I stand behind everybody that spoke tonight. But we'd like to see more of each of you make efforts throughout our community. Participants take their time to come forward, feel ignored. Are you listening, hearing, or implementing our concerns? By using the catchphrases, we're listening, affordable housing, and climate change to appease the concerns of the majority of us? Stating you're supporting extremely low affordable housing, yet the developer and property owner are stating that their original site plan had 175 moderate, which are 50% affordable housing units, and was working to save the trees, but is no longer for a sound transit road to nowhere. I appreciate the preservation and protection of the manufactured home communities. The main goal is to keep people most vulnerable housed. Yet where is the mobile home community zoning? So very sad. That is all you came out of that with your 2025 legislation priorities list of the years of us coming forward to make sure to tell people upon sale that they cannot move their mobile homes. What's missing? There are additional laws, tenant protections, manufactured home zoning that should protect these communities because the homes are owned by the tenants. The homes and the lots are pretty much maintained by the tenants. What about the city standing strongly to additionally protect and preserve these communities as the state has called for? The staff presentation seems misleading. There is an actual threat of less housing units. Presentations need to disclose all options. The housing element was whipped through in just 15 minutes with the commission, stating, oh, we don't have much time to go over the elements. So where is the mobile home community zoning? Where is the presentation and protections? As a resident, I would like to see the presentation, which I believe the Planning Commission also stated they wanted additional information and time to review. The chart of resident ages in Kenmore fails to show the multiple numbers of seniors, those with disabilities, that have been priced out of Kenmore since the corporate investors have been aggressively inflating rents. It's unfair to consider all mobile home communities as deteriorating with failing to hold the property owners to code. Some of you know they received low interest infrastructure grants and loans, but did little to improve their property. That's a code issue. I hope that you will again look at this because we need to preserve the affordable housing units that we have And we need more building of real extremely low affordable housing. We
Thank
need to keep our
you.
most vulnerable housed.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Valenzuela. Mayor Herbig, that concludes our speakers list.
All right, well, I thank everybody who came, and we do appreciate it. We do appreciate the input. Next on the agenda is our consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion from the deputy mayor, second from Councilmember Lucis. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is adopted unanimously. First item on the business agenda, Shoreline Fire Department, North Shore Fire Department Proposition 1, proposed formation of a Shoreline Fire Department Regional Fire Authority, presented by Fire Chief Matt Cowan.
Okay, well, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me and being able to talk about this important measure that we've got coming up on the ballot. I want to first say thank you for supporting the lid lift that we had earlier this year and that it passed. And that was very helpful for setting us up for 2025. I have some slides that I'd like to go through, but first I'd like to share with you a little bit of a story from me as to how I entered into the fire service and a little bit about my passion in leadership and how I look at the organization of our fire department. For me, it started over 40 years ago. I was playing a practice round of golf and a plane crashed on the hole that I was playing. And I ran up trying to help, thinking that I could help. And I didn't know what to do. And that sat with me, not knowing what to do and wanting to help. And when I was a little bit older, I ended up starting volunteering as a firefighter. And then about 32 years ago, I ended up becoming a paid firefighter. And throughout my career, that has stuck with me about trying to give back. I started volunteering because I wanted to give back to the community. When I became a firefighter, it was about serving the people that I saw, through emergency responses. And as my responsibilities grew and I started moving up through the ranks and becoming a chief, a leader, and all that, a big part of that responsibility is supporting our personnel in being able to deliver services, but also to make sure that we have a healthy organization. And that gets back to the levels of service that we provide and being financially efficient and being fiscally responsible. So I want to give you a little bit of a backstory as to why I'm a big proponent of regionalization as a whole. So I only have about 20 slides to go through, so please bear with me. But for me, So what is a fire authority, a regional fire authority? A regional fire authority is like starting a brand new fire department and starting anew. It's usually a couple of fire districts or fire departments. It can be a municipal fire department as well, coming together, and focusing on efficiencies. It is very similar to fire districts, which is both what North Shore and Shoreline are right now. And the funding is very similar with a fire benefit charge and a fire tax levy. But the focus of a regional fire authority is to make sure that we're growing with the services and the communities that we serve. And the highest priority for me has always been the level of service. If we can find some efficiencies and financial savings, that's great, but we really need to be focusing on maintaining or improving levels of service. And bigger isn't always better. If it's done with the right motivation, right transparency, the right intent, right timing, regionalization can be a very good thing for organizations. And a lot of it comes down to the days of having a 2 or 3 station fire department. It's just not as sustainable as it has been. So what are we looking for? This was a busy week this last week. We not only passed our budgets and so forth, but we also at both boards approved the RFA plan. It is now approved and I'm ready to submit to the county to put it on the February ballot. It's a February 11th special election. It's going to take a supermajority vote, not because of the RFA necessarily, but because we are starting anew. And even though both the North Shore and Shoreline Fire Departments have a fire benefit charge, starting a fire benefit charge the first time takes a supermajority vote. So it's going to take a 60% plus one vote. The good news is that thereafter, if we're reauthorizing the fire benefit charge, or if other entities want to join that RFA, it'll only take a simple majority, which will be nice. One of the things that I get asked quite a bit is, why the Regional Fire Authority? The King County is a little late to this effort. If you look at other counties around us, Snohomish County, Pierce County, Kitsap County, other states, California, Oregon, they've already done this quite a bit. And we've had about 16 RFAs in the area, 6 in this immediate region, with lots of success. I don't know of one that hasn't been successful. And it's because of the viability, because of those efficiencies that I've mentioned. In fact, the North End Fire Departments have already been working on this for many decades. I've been with Shoreline for about 11 and a half years, and over the last 8 years especially, there's been a lot of robust conversations about it. In fact, at one point, there was all 4 agencies across North End, North Shore, Shoreline, Bothell, and Woodinville were all trying to do this. We've had a couple of false starts, to be honest, and for different reasons. And so about 2.5 years ago, North Shore and Shoreline got together in an ILA, interlocal agreement, a contract. And that gained a lot of the efficiencies, but it was only the first step towards a regional fire authority. And a good analogy is looking at it like, you're dating and now we're engaged, and that's our ILA, and now we're looking to get married. We're looking for a long-term commitment, looking for those long-term sustainabilities and efficiencies. And under the ILA, we were able to gain a lot of those efficiencies, but there's still more that can be gained. The services that we provided, I'll give you a minute to look at these. These are all the services that we provide under the ILA through the Shoreline Fire Department. I was meeting with Representative Klova earlier today, and she was asking me about our low acuity responses. And so I wanted to bring your attention to our mobile integrated healthcare. I don't think that we probably express how much of a difference that our team makes, our mobile integrated healthcare team makes. And I'm really excited about being able to expand it even more in 2026. So under the ILA, we were able to, one of the biggest things that I think operationally that we were able to do is we added a peak hour aid car in Lake Forest Park. And we started transporting all of the patients that we saw from the scene all the way to the hospital. And that continuity of care, that higher level of care is really a big difference in that the level of service that we provide on those EMS calls. We were also able to improve our rescue responses. Here in Kenmore, we've had a rescue vehicle, but have not been able to staff it up for a very long time. And then earlier this year, especially, we made a big effort towards starting to staff it. And we've got some plans longer term to even add more staffing to it and improve its availability. It even went on a couple of responses today. It's not just for technical rescue responses, it's on all of our major emergencies. We were also able to expand our fire marshal services, doing more investigations, more permitting, more inspections, making our buildings safer. We were also able to, Shoreline has a fleet and facilities division. So we were able to start making some of the repairs and being preventative maintenance, both on our apparatus and the facilities. We've also been able to enhance some of our administrative capabilities for us. In Shoreline, it was a big step up in the ILA to be able to bring the administrative people over and get better depth in the services that we provide as well. But the big thing that the ILA was able to do was the financial efficiencies. Through eliminating some of the redundancies, we were able to save about $1.4 million annually. As I mentioned, we were starting to transport patients, and that allowed us to be able to bill insurance companies for those transports. We don't send anybody to collections or anything like that. We just bill insurance companies and reinvest that money back locally in the services that we provide, as opposed to them going to their parent company out of state or wherever that's at. And then also, as I mentioned, we were able to start doing some of the preventative maintenance on our apparatus and facilities, and being able to reduce some of the emergency breaks or failures that we had, and then having to pay, higher levels to make sure that higher costs to make sure that we were getting those things back into service. So overall, the ILA did a number of different things. It helped us with service improvements, lowering costs, increasing savings, streamlining our administration, eliminating duplication, and then also enhancing representation and governance. And hopefully with an RFA, we'll be able to lock in those savings. Some of that enhanced collaboration that I was talking about is that our firefighters are able to work together, and we are working together fairly well. But again, as we look at the long term, that collaboration will just only improve. We have a better use under an RFA. We would have a better use of using our equipment, both apparatus and our personnel, in a more efficient manner, where they would be able to go to where the needs arose without worrying about who owned which apparatus and so forth, which is one of the constraints that we have now. As I mentioned, we'd also have our increased rescue capabilities. And then also, as we cement our relationship under an RFA, we'd have a better pooling of our RFA, under an RFA, of our resources. And that allows us to be able to get better economies of scale, be able to get more savings. For example, we're buying a new rescue. The rescue I just mentioned is getting pretty old. And so North Shore is purchasing one right now, and Shoreline's purchasing a ladder truck. If we had been able to be under the same budget and under the same organization, we could have pooled those resources and probably received a multiple apparatus discount, saving that could save hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I mean, and one of the other things too is that pooling those resources gives us better opportunity to leverage those towards grants and other, opportunities that arise. The big thing financially for us under the RFA is, as I entered into the ILA, I knew there was going to be a lot of efficiencies. As all the personnel came over from North Shore to Shoreline, that was under the ILA, we gained a lot of those financial efficiencies, but I was kind of surprised when I entered into the RFA evaluations and so forth, how much more savings there could be. For example, it's not a lot, but there's about $196,000 in savings that could occur in just the eliminating some of the redundancies at the governing level. But one of the biggest savings is we can save over $3 million by eliminating the need for carryover. I'm sure you're all familiar with, you need to be able to get from the end of the year to April 1st for tax and fire benefit charge collection and so forth. And right now, both North Shore and Shoreline are both holding carryover funds to be able to make sure that we are fiscally solvent to get to that first half tax collection. And we could save over $3 million by eliminating some of those redundancies. It's mostly on the Shoreline side if we were to try and divide it up, but I'm looking at this as a collaborative partnership, and I look at these savings as something that we would share. So it's a significant improvement in our financial, not only viability, but those savings. We also reduce our liability and risk as pooling our resources, such as our capital funds, such as our benefit funds. As we pool our resources and remove some of that liability, we don't have to carry as much in those reserves. And right now, we're estimating that we could drop the equivalent levy rate. Right now, I'm estimating that here in Kenmore and Lake Forest Park, that we'll be at $112.5 in equivalent levy rate, and Shoreline's at $1.16. We could actually drop it down to $1.07, maybe even all the way down to $1 with these savings. So there's some significant opportunities here financially. And from a sustainability standpoint, we would have better protection from fluctuations in values. Actually, the North Shore, or I'm sorry, Lake Forest Park and Kenmore and Shoreline, we usually match each other fairly closely, but there's a bit more growth going on in Shoreline, especially compared to Lake Forest Park. There's some going on in here, and of course in Kenmore too. But those fluctuations would average out, and we'd have better sustainability and less fluctuations from year to year, which is a more consistent approach, which people, of course, enjoy more. And then also we have that opportunity in better resource sharing. I already mentioned that. And it's not just equipment and personnel, it's the leveraging that we can garner. And then one of the last things that we could do is to help maintain our Class 2 rating from WSRB, the Washington State Rating Bureau. This last year, we were able to lower our overall rating to a 2, from a 3 to a 2. It's backwards. And that puts us in the top 2% of the state. And that rating translates, especially on commercial and multifamilies, to improved insurance rates and savings. And it can also contribute to even single-family residence savings. There's only one Class 1, and that's Seattle, and they dropped at the same time from a 2 to a 1. So just to kind of put it in perspective, that's where we're at. And that is something that we appealed on through Shoreline, and we're able to get that, and it's a benefit to all of us. One of the things that, from a selfish standpoint, I suppose, that our RFA would do is it would remove some of the burden on myself. And I use myself because it's all about me. Not kidding, but our administrative staff, we have redundancies right now. Right now, I have multiple boards, multiple cities, multiple resolutions and budgets and meetings and so forth. There would be efficiencies there. And for my administrative staff, I estimate there's probably a full-time position in efficiency that could be gained, because I have people that are still managing the separate funds, the different benefit funds, the capital funds, the budgets, and so forth. And so it would end up being, and it's not in my estimates, but it would be an efficiency of probably another couple $100,000 in savings, in either not being able to have to hire another person, or through the efficiencies in the workload. And then finally, too, in our support services, there would be an advantage of not having to pull from different budgets and when we manage different projects. My deputy chief of support services would be able to be more efficient with the bidding and with the work that needs to be done on our facilities. And one of the things that we heard very loud and clear from both citizens and our boards and so forth was the governance. We ended up going with a regional fire authority and not just merging the two districts together. We could have merged the two fire districts together very easily. It would have been a lot faster and more streamlined. But we heard very loud and clear that it was important to have the local input, the local perspective, the local governance. And so we went with the regional fire authority, and our plan is to maintain both the North Shore and Shoreline fire districts. There's 2 boards of elected commissioners, both 5 each, and putting them together into a board of 10 on the RFA governing board. It's a little more than I would like, and over time there might be some attrition that brings that number down, but that would ensure equal geographical representation from the local communities, and being able to ensure that the input and the perspective is heard. Any change to that board would require a majority. So even it's 50-50, it would require some consensus to make any changes to that. And that allows, again, for that input and for future growth. And then finally, like as I mentioned earlier, an RFA is cementing that relationship. It's like getting married. It secures some of the benefits that we've already garnered through the ILA, and ensures that those won't, those won't go away. It allows for future investment and future improvements in both levels of service and some of those savings. And it allows for other entities to join if they so choose. There's some talk that's out there as far as other entities that might want to join. That would take a simple, again, that would take a simple majority, not a super majority. So right now we're setting the template, we're setting what the organization is going to look like. And then it's possible that others, might join in the future. And then again, I'm going to mention the class 2 rating again, because it's so important. And an RFA would allow us to help maintain that RFA. It was one of the questions that the reviewer had for us was, what does that relationship look like? Could it go away? Because there is mutually beneficial efficiencies that we share across both our fire departments. And I tried to go through that quickly. Sorry, there's probably a lot of information in there. And if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. We also have more information on our website. There's an FAQ, and there's our cost estimates and ballot measure language and so forth. Again, we will be submitting this to the county probably this next week. And I also wanted to mention that I look at our organization as a three-legged stool, and the leadership between the governance, the administration, and the body. And all three legs are excited about this and supportive of it. I actually, I had a couple of firefighters that want to come up. We'll go there and show our support. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Thank you. But go home, please. You've already spent enough time. I just wanted to share with you that it was a 5-0 vote from both the North Shore Board and the Shoreline Board. The union is in support of this. The body is in support of this. We've already had some outreach to some of the electeds. I mentioned Representative Klova earlier today. And so I believe that everybody is seeing a lot of those benefits that I've raced through tonight, and those cost savings. And this is setting us up for a better long-term future. I have some other charts and data for you if you'd like, but I'd rather answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Councilor Lutzis.
I've got a couple of quick questions, just some things that you had pointed out in your presentation. You mentioned that consolidation of these agencies would also consolidate policies and boards. And my first question is, when it comes to that consolidation of policies, is there currently an existing major disparity among the agencies? Would there be like a major change of culture, major change of how departments are run? Or are they pretty similar?
Between North Shore and Shoreline?
Between North Shore and Shoreline, yeah.
We're pretty well aligned.
Okay.
We've done this for about 2.5 years under the ILA.
Yes.
So there's still some growing that's still occurring, but I believe that our personnel are working very, very well together. We did a lot of work before the ILA to try and make sure that we were discussing all of the concerns, any pitfalls that there were, both operationally, administrative, personnel-wise, and so forth. Of course, there's still different cultures, but we're pretty well aligned. It did definitely helped that all the North Shore employees became Shoreline employees and came to our contract, our policies, our things. But in that process, we also evaluated what each of the departments were doing. And there was times that North Shore was doing things better, and we were able to integrate those things and improve overall everything. Well, not everything, but overall those areas that we were that we could identify that there was a different way of doing things.
Thank you. My second question is, when it comes to those boards, you said you have, this question's a little more for fun, but when you have 2 boards of 5, that equals 10, and how are you going to deal with an even numbered board if they split?
I've always taken the approach that I don't necessarily need an odd number. And the reason why is I have a board of 5 right now. And even if I received a 3-2 vote to approve something, I don't look at that as a good win or a good approval. I look at that as I should have either had a 4-1 or a 5-0 vote. I either needed to explain more, or I needed to go back to the drawing board and come up with a different plan. So I don't look as a 3-2 vote, even though it'd get approved as a win. And so for me, I don't necessarily need an odd number just to get that slim majority win. I look at that as I need to do a better job of educating and informing or coming up with a different plan. I did ask our attorney about that because I asked, and he goes, I've got other boards that have done, even numbers and it's never been a problem. I'm like, okay, well, thank you. But, I would like it to be less than 10.
Yeah.
Long-term. But that can take some time and through attrition and them reforming and letting everything kind of filter out and settle.
Thank you.
Questions? Councilmember Sassen and then Councilmember Culver.
I just want to reiterate thank you for being here, Chief. I want to just reflect back the concern that we had from our last conversation, which I believe our mayor articulated, which was our concern from the south end of Kenmore being accessible only over 2 bridges. And I want to acknowledge that, and I want to reflect back what I think your response was, which is if the bridges are inaccessible, we rely on Kirkland. Can you confirm for me that that's true?
All fire departments rely on mutual aid
Mhm.
to some level. Relying on mutual aid for daily operations, as long as it's equal and it's going back and forth, I suppose that's acceptable, but long-term, that's not a good solution. Right now, we still respond to South Kenmore. If it's a critical call, or if there's a delayed response from, say, Station 51 here, or even 57, it'll pull a Kirkland unit, or maybe even further away. So there's always, I want to assure everybody that there's always a response. And on critical calls, it doesn't matter where it's coming from, it will pull the closest vehicle. Our vehicles have, it's called AVL. It's basically a computer that's always tracking where the vehicle is. And dispatch can see that. And when they put in a critical call, like a fire, or cardiac arrest, or a major car wreck, or things of that nature, all borders go away and the closest vehicle will come, which is one of the reasons why sometimes a fire engine will show up for an aid call. Because the people that are on it are trained to a EMT BLS, level, basic life support level. And there's other rigs that are also coming, but it'll send the closest unit at all times for those critical calls. So please be assured that there is a response coming. If the bridges became inaccessible for whatever reason, Kirkland would help us out and take those calls. Again, the critical calls. If it was an earthquake or something that took out, knock on wood, hopefully not, but if it took out we would probably get similar calls too from some of our neighbors to help them out. We all rely on mutual aid because we can't take care of the bigger calls all by ourselves. It becomes very cost prohibitive. So we rely on that mutual aid, and we try to make sure that it's equal. The amount of aid that we give is the amount that we receive, and vice versa.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have 2 more quick things, but first I want to say, as a home birth midwife for 20 years, I'm aware of how many people can show up from how many places. But I wanted to make sure that our South Kenmore residents felt represented this evening. The second thing I want to say is I'm not constitutionally a great big fan of bigger being better. And so I feel like we are approaching the edge of my comfort zone with that. That's mostly a comment. And then my question is, I heard you say that the union, the firefighter union, is in favor. And I just wondered if the union had any specific feedback or input about this process that you could share with us. And that's my last question.
I mean, just general support. They've been lockstep. I engaged with them early on in the thought process behind it. This goes back, it goes back beyond me being the fire chief here at Shoreline. This goes for decades. This has been something that's been talked about, and then again over the last decade robustly. And so some of those false starts that I mentioned earlier, I think really got a lot of the information out there and the pros and cons and the thought process behind it. And so as the last effort that when about 3 years ago, and what triggered us joining the ILA in North Shore, I think everybody was coming together at that time. I haven't heard anything but support at this point.
Councilor Culver?
Thank you. I think this makes a ton of sense. Thank you for coming and giving this talk, giving this presentation for us. I thought I saw it earlier in the slides and just wanted to drive it home, just sort of the financial piece for homeowners. The estimate is that 100% would, their bill would go down essentially. Is that something you could speak to?
Thank you. I skipped over that point. Yes, we're estimating, I'll show you a slide here. This is some cost estimating, for the RFA. Showing, and I'll bring your attention to this number here, the $16.6 and the $12.5, which is what we're estimating for next year for both Shoreline and North Shore respectively. And that we're looking at $1.77 as a decrease. That will end up being a savings for all single-family residents, homeowners. It will also end up being about a 90, we estimate, it's tough to say exactly with the fire benefit charge, but about 98% of all properties even will see a decrease in the overall money that they give to the fire department for operations. And the properties that may not see that decrease would be commercial and multifamilies, just because of the way the fire benefit charge is set up and the differences in sprinkler discounts and so forth, things like that. But yes, all homeowners, will see that decrease.
Awesome, thank you. I don't know if others have questions, but I wonder if we might be willing to consider an endorsement for this in the future. Look to
Yeah,
the mayor.
let's finish up our discussion really quickly.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, I just had a couple small questions. One, I just want to make sure, I need to ask this question. I think I know the answer. I need to ask it though anyway. Is this going to affect level of service, response times, anything?
No, yeah, well, only better in the long term, because we're operating, fairly together already. This won't have a dramatic effect on the short term, but long term it will, because as we get those savings, we can reinvest them in either, decreased taxes or increased levels of service or a combination of both. So, but short term, no.
That's what I suspected, but I just wanted to ask the question. And then my other question is, would this affect what's currently happening? I mean, I don't know actually what the situation is, but is it 51 down the street?
Station 51, yes.
Yeah, when that was built, it was the headquarters. It's got a bunch of office space, and a bunch of other things. I don't know if that's still being used. Will it still be used at all for administrative things?
Oh,
The RFA
oh,
is
yes.
approved? Okay.
Yes, even under the ILA, we're using it pretty extensively. We've moved our medical services officer, our MSO. It's like a battalion chief of our paramedics. We've moved that office to there. We have a day shift battalion chief that's stationed there. We've moved more of our fire marshal office personnel there. So believe me, even though that station is really big, we've actually thought about, what would it look like to try and move administration, like all of the administration there. It's not big enough. So we're trying to look at different options, but yes, we will continue to use that, probably even more so than what we're doing it now.
Yeah, it'd just be a shame for that relatively new building to
No.
get mothballed or something.
Well, no, one of the things that we are really excited about is that the mobile integrated healthcare team that I was mentioning earlier, we moved our team there. It's 2 social workers and 2 firefighter EMTs. And so that they're more geographically centered to the service because they provide beyond just the fire district boundaries. And we're looking at expanding that in 2026 as well. So yeah, we're going to continue to use it.
Great. Are there any further questions on this? Councilor Marshall.
The mayor's question brings up a question for me. Is the 51 still going to be used for community meeting space?
It can be for certain organizations. Because it's been pretty busy at the station, it started in COVID and then continued. We use it for certain organizations And then, we're just using it, like, for example, tonight, it's got an EMT class, that's being taught there. It's being used in the evenings and even during the day for training quite a bit. So I wouldn't say no, it depends on the organization, but we are limiting it because it's being used a lot. Sorry.
Anything further from anyone?
It is also the EOC too, so it's for the area. So I'm sorry, Emergency Operations Center. Sorry. The fire service, we're full of acronyms.
Councilmember Culver?
I would move to endorse, direct staff to prepare an endorsement and kindly ask for a second.
I'll second that. I assume you're asking for to add the endorsement to a future, like, next week meeting or before we get out of here for the year?
That is exactly it, yes.
Okay. I'll second. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I may recommend that we open it up to public comment pursuant to 4217A 555 prior
That is
to
correct.
the vote on the motion.
Thank you for catching that.
You're welcome.
Yes, as the city attorney said, pursuant to RCW 4217A 555(1), members of the public are afforded an approximately equal opportunity for expression of an opposing view. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this ballot measure? Did we have a sign up or?
I'll sign up after. You don't have a sign
Thank you,
up sheet for
Mayor.
it.
Actually, Mr. O'Brien, you did sign up, so don't
Okay.
worry. We have two guests wishing to speak, Patrick O'Brien on site and Stacy Valenzuela online.
All right, Mr. O'Brien.
All right. Funny how this whole transition in our fire department changed right after two of our fire commissioners died within months of each other. And then we saw this huge transformation. We no longer want to be North Shore. We want to join up with somebody. We didn't know if it was Bothell, Woodinville, or whatever. And I would say you have an expert in this town. His name is Dave Marins. And before you decide to do anything, and I'm not a friend of Dave Marins, but he knows more about this subject than all of us here. Maybe not you, but all the rest of us here, he does. And I would invite him to come in and critique this presentation, which was very well done. He hit all the buzzwords. You're going to save money. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Fantastic. Let's run it through the Dave Marins test and see what he has to say. Because I'll tell you what will happen is we'll have a lot less local control. They also want to sell the fire station across from Arrowhead. Who gets that money? Why couldn't that be used for a lower level emergency center or at least use the real estate? The fact is that we're being sold something and none of us are experts in it. So I ask you, I implore you to call some local people up that do know about this and the process we went through to get here. I know when I ran for fire commissioner, I was running against spouses of firefighters. You know, that's a little bit close to be kind of independent, I would think. And it's wonderful that we have money savings. Good golly, that's great. But what's more important is that we can fight an asphalt and aviation fuel fire on our waterfront. And he has not said anything about that as, oh, we might get a fireboat. That's great. But when that fire burns up $1 billion worth of airplane, we are no longer the seafaring, wonderful float plane people that we ascribe to be. We are somebody with a charred waterfront, an asphalt plant, a concrete plant, and Lake Point that's, you know, got its problems yet to be tested. So let's consider all these things before we jump pell-mell into acceptance of North Shore. Shoreline is a long way away. We won't be controlling who gets hired, where the assets go. There's no real local control. There's a board of commissioners that can be outvoted. I liked it a lot better when we had local people in control and people hiring and people could run the training schedules that we won't have that. And what we know is when bureaucracies get bigger, they listen less. They don't listen more. It's like, oh, gee, Puget Sound Energy, we're out of energy here.
Thank you,
Is
Mr.
that 3
O'Brien.
minutes?
Yes, it is.
Oh, well, thank
Stacy
you.
Valenzuela.
Oh, one more thing.
Thank you,
Let's
Mr.
have the,
O'Brien.
let's have the, no, let's have the
Thank you, Mr.
CC.
O'Brien.
The
Ms.
closed
Valenzuela,
caption
so
needs to
Mr.
be up for
O'Brien, your
public
time is up.
comments. Thank you.
Stacy, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We hear you. Go on.
Thank you. Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. I was a huge supporter of the firefighters when Proposition 1 came through. I attended many meetings as we went through whether or not to join sides with East Side Fire. We were told then that the RFP would take away from the facilities being here in Kenmore, and the same thing is happening. We were told that we would have more money in the bank and more services here. But guess what? North Shore Consortium took the funding for the new fire engine that was supposed to come to our fire station here. It's very sad, very disappointing. And I know also that several residents met with Eric Admin and talked about how they wanted an aid car up on the hill and needed one desperately up there, that it was more than 7 minutes for a fire aid car to get in that area. And not only were they told by the chief that 7 minutes is the average now when you need an aid card in 4, but also that the decisions were already made and that the residents' opinion did not count. Double whammy disappointment. I'm usually so far for the firefighters, but since we have gone under Shoreline, I feel like we're stepchildren. Shoreline and Lake Forest Park get free life vests for their children and families. What do we get here? They get time when the parents can come and have their children's safety seats checked in the cars. What do we get here? It's not the same. And of course, our savings is gone because it was spent for the consortium, whereas Shoreline has a savings, but they did get their station renovated not only once, but asked for twice. Lake Forest Park got their station updated. We were lucky here to get the radios updated. So it's not the same thing. And now Bothel's involved too. So I think you really need to think about all these things because Kenmore is not getting the highest service that we should have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That concludes our speakers list.
Mr. O'Brien, you're out of order. Point of orders can only be raised by people on the board.
As per RCW, I have a point of order, which could be aired. It says here, afforded an approximate equal opportunity for expression of opposing views. There is no equality in the amount of time this young man had and what your audience has had. And so I find the 3 minutes to be wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. That brings us back to Councilmember Culver's motion, which is before us to bring back a ordinance in the next meeting in support of the RFA. City Attorney.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. If I may clarify, a resolution for the next agenda.
Correct. Yes.
And it would need to be on the business, as a business item
Yes.
with a second opportunity for public comment.
Of course.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. That'll be on next Monday's business agenda. Thank you very much, Chief.
No, thank you very much for hearing me out. If any of you have any questions, please contact me. I just want to get the information out there.
Thank you. That brings us to our first of 2 public hearings. Our first is on comprehensive plan amendments presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent and Principal Planner Todd Hall for a public hearing.
Good evening, Council. So tonight is a public hearing, and that is based on feedback that you provided at your November 12th meeting for additional substantive comments, which are part of this hearing. So the reason you need a hearing is any substantive comments that are brought forward after the Planning Commission hearing. And those changes are highlighted on attachment 2 in the edited version of the housing element. And I'll quickly go through those. So on page H22, we added the word new to note that that would be new units projected to be built by 2044 and clarified that in a footnote. Council requested to have a map showing the location of racial restrictive covenants. We added that map based on data provided from the Washington State Racial Restrictive Covenants Project. And that's on page H-24. And we also provided a paragraph describing the context about racially restricted covenants, which is highlighted in green on page H-23. We also added a new policy on page H-35 to allow small houses on small lots, and that's new policy H-1.1.5. We've also previously noted that the land capacity analysis report is part of this hearing because this document wasn't specifically available to the Planning Commission. This document does support that there is sufficient capacity to accommodate housing targets in the future. And that analysis would be proposed to be included as an appendix to the comprehensive plan. At your November 12th council meeting, the council direction was to schedule a joint meeting with the Planning Commission to discuss the findings of the land capacity analysis report, and that meeting will be scheduled in January. Following the November 12th council meeting, we received an additional substantive amendment from a council member, which staff recommends also be considered as part of the public hearing. This was addition of a new implementation measures regarding future adoption of development standards. And that is included in your packet as attachment number 3. So staff would recommend that council open the public hearing, receive public comment, and then following the hearing, staff would then be looking for direction on the substantive amendments that are part of the hearing, and also direction on whether to bring forward an ordinance for consideration on December 9th, adopting the housing element and also other comp plan amendments which you've given previous direction on earlier in the year. That is my introduction to the hearing this evening. Thank you.
Do you have any questions from us before we open up the public hearing? All right. For the public hearing, folks will get 3 minutes to speak. The same comment rules apply, including stating your name and city of residence and addressing your comments directly to the mayor and the city council. We'll hear from our on-site guests first, followed by any pre-registered virtual guests. And we want to thank everybody for taking the time to participate. I declare the public hearing open.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 guests wishing to speak. Patrick O'Brien on site, followed by Stacey Valenzuela online. Mr. O'Brien.
Pat O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. The major concern I have is that there's a lot of development along 522 and no, well, if you'll recall, we originally saw a plan for Lake Point. Oh, here's the hotel, here's the marina. Same thing happened for the Kenmore Village. Oh, this is the new movie theater. This is where the grocery store will be. And you know, it didn't evolve. It didn't happen that way. And the thing that you're lacking in all this is public disclosure on the road to nowhere. You've heard that, a road that's going to go from the old fire station parking lot and cut across behind Jay's Cafe and affect the bowling alley and other property owners' property. That has not been aired to the public. We have not had a comment. And if it's one thing I know, we don't want to look like Lake City. And it seems like the more density we put on 522 and fewer restaurants and fewer amenities to get people to come into our town, the more that we're just going to look ridiculous, not to mention the problem we have having a very important heron rookery. And the workarounds are not being discussed with the public. There looks like there's going to be an absolute forfeiture of property through eminent domain. I don't think that the city staff, has spoken with the people that might be concerned on this. Certainly not the property owners. Certainly not the people at the bowling alley. What the heck's going on here? And I asked earlier, who is your commercial real estate agent in the city of Kenmore? We don't have one was the answer. Why the heck don't you have one? None of you are realtors. None of you have an idea of what the real estate law is. And, it would be so important to have an idea what the Commercial Brokers Association boilerplate documents are, what true feasibility is, where the buyer, insists on feasibility. And the seller has to perform. They have to say what's wrong with the property. I mean, you've got all these things going on having to do with real estate, and you have no good real estate record in development, acquisition, and certainly not sale. So I would say, whoa, why don't you have some models, some things for the public to look at, and then decide what we want the facade of our city to look like. Otherwise, we're going to have Lake City, and nobody wants to have Lake City. Thank you.
Stacy Valenzuela.
Hi, Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. The housing element, as well as the land elements, clearly fail to list the mobile home community zoning, preservation, and protection. Where is it? I do not see it anywhere. I do not see a clear map for the TOD for the exceptional tree ordinance and which parcels. That was never presented as to which parcels were not included in that. You heard Lake City Partners last week confirm the need for extremely low monthly affordable housing and the incomes of my fixed income neighbors, that the seniors are the highest number in homelessness, but they're not included in any of the counts. And they're likely surfing on couches, living in cars and in our encampments now because they've been priced out. The claims of development of affordable housing, but missing the mark on the lowest incomes is huge. Will you take the opportunity to include everybody in these numbers and make sure that the mobile home communities are preserved, protected, and saved? I would like to see that on here before anything is adopted or passed. And you know how much it clearly means because so many in the mobile home communities have come forward in the past to get the mobile home zoning included. So I would like you to take care of that, as well as the other communities that we're looking for saving, which would be like Cedar Park Apartments. What's going on there? We're not in necessarily because some of you like the ULI proposal over at the Park and Ride. Are we behind it? Because of course, like Patrick had said, we care, and a lot of residents care about the Heron Rookery extremely, and that should be a preserved, protected area. I hope you'll hear our cries, because we do need help in preserving and making sure the right comp goes forward in our plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Elizabeth Mooney has also signed up.
Thank you, Elizabeth Mooney. I am here to try to help you all understand what some of the citizens who aren't here are communicating to me. And they're very involved in the environment. They're very involved in the housing. So here's one person's comment. We need to find out how to meet our housing needs and retain the environment. So I do encourage us to go back about that other amendment. I support what Stacy Valenzuela just said. And at our PERC meeting, she was going to give an explanation about all that she knows about the mobile homes and all that zoning. So that's at the next meeting. Thank you, Stacy Valenzuela, for helping get us informed. I need to learn more to even voice an opinion. I promise I'm going to go to the planning commissions because as much as I love this city, I have not been going. So I am trying harder to help you understand what the people are saying, attending council coffee, etc. Now, here is one suggestion that I have from a friend. Her name is Nancy, and she said she's a member of the community. You know her. And she's very wise. People are not feeling fully okay about the housing plan so far. Concerns about overbuilding in fragile areas. This part, I think, is brilliant. I would think we need to know the actual physical capacity of this land. Has any authority been consulted on this? I believe we could get some very worthwhile information from our state ecology department. There are local agencies we can call on without spending a lot of money, along with reports from community members who have backgrounds in natural resources. If so, I really would like a community group to sit down and look again, maybe in 2025, with more input from the community into the process. I think having 9 people asked to develop a plan within so many miles from transit, et cetera, was a job they did well, but lacking all the information they should have had to work with and time. I remember the rush, not a fair way to have to do this. Another little comment that I don't know what it means, but I want to learn before. For the housing element, I would love for us to embrace alternative compliance for HB 1110 so that we can keep Swamp Creek and the Sammamish River lots as low density as possible. Long-term vision is a habitat corridor. And I take exception to the table that says consider MH for R1. Never.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney. Mayor Herbig, that concludes our speakers list.
Is there anybody else present wishing to be heard? Anyone else present wishing to be heard? Last call for anybody else present wishing to be heard. Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Do we have any questions or comments for Ms. Bent? Councilor Lutzis?
Yes, I have a question on attachment 3. I believe that is the proposed amendment to housing element, that last bullet point highlighted in green. I believe you said that a council member had made that suggestion in the interim. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And that was Councilmember Marshall who may want to speak to that.
Yes, could I hear the justification? Oh, okay, you don't want to speak. Okay, I know the only thing that stuck out to me on this one was just the first little chunk, adopt development standards that incentivize limiting new construction to the previous building footprint. And I know in my mind, when thinking about that and balancing that with the environment, I can think of examples in which sometimes it is more beneficial to reduce the footprint or to move the footprint to a less critical area. That would be my only comment on that. Still with, I think, the same intent as what you're saying, but it's, I think, just that first line limiting to the previous building footprint. But that's just my only comment on that. Thank you.
Councilor Culver?
Thank you. A few things. This is fairly minor, but the page 24, I think line 20 mentions the manufactured housing appeal, which has been resolved. So we just speak to that, which would be good. We've also gotten some comments about it. I just wondered if we could, I don't have a visual suggestion exactly, but just spell that out a little bit so that folks understand what's involved in the moratorium and that we're still protecting it. Might be helpful to have a visual aid. Couple other things. This road to nowhere has come up a few times, and I know it's part of the transportation element, but it's come to be a factor in housing. I wonder if that is something that we could just reflect on, review, potentially reconsider before sort of this year's adoption, if others might be interested, knowing that's been a hot topic. Not hearing anything. There we go. I guess the only thing, it's later on our agenda tonight, but the facilitators, those statements, I think they would function best, if anywhere, under barriers to production. I think that's why that exists. And I have a lot of comments, but I will save those for now. So that is all I got. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
I just have a small one for Councilmember Marshall's suggestion, where it says encourage reduction of new impervious surfaces. I would say encourage reduction of impervious surfaces. I think that meets the goal. Reducing what's not there, that I'm not understanding that, but reduction of impervious surfaces is something that I think we've all spoken about.
Got a couple of questions. And I know, again, I'm bringing this up because it came up during public hearing. Councilmember Colvin just brought it up, so I'm hoping that you might be able to prepare to be able to answer this, Ms. Ben. If not, I understand. But the road that folks are bringing up, that isn't a new thing in this comp plan. This has been in the comp plan for, like, I believe it was in the last comp plan and possibly even the one before. Is that correct?
It was included when the transportation element was adopted.
But it wasn't a new addition this year, right?
It was a new addition in including it in the comp plan and noting it in the transportation element as a future road connection.
And nothing we're doing here changes or affects our current mobile home protections. Is that correct?
That is true. The mobile home park zoning is in place and will remain in place until council decides it wishes to amend it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear because there always seems to be some questions around that. And as much as I tell people that that's in zoning law and is not being changed, there seems to be questions always coming up on that front. Something else. Oh, I have to say I'm not totally comfortable, frankly, with Councilor Marshall's addition here. It's not realistic for us to limit new construction to the previous building's footprint. I mean, if we were to do that with, a project on 522, then we wouldn't be able to build anything feasible along 522, which might be some people's motive, but I don't think is realistic for us as a city if we want to meet our growth numbers and build housing that we desperately need. So I'm not speaking for myself. Okay with that first sentence, at least, of the addition. The rest of it, I don't have an issue with personally, but Councilor Marshall?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Probably I could have clarified more by saying that these are all meant to be for residential development. It's in single family for the most part, but residential. And so not commercial necessarily. So that might help. And I'm also appreciate and open to if staff wants to look at Councilmember Lutz's and Deputy Mayor O'Kane's suggestions. Those sound good. They seem to do the same intent.
Councilor Sassen?
I just want to concur. I've been, with all due respect to Councilmember Marshall, I'm looking at this green highlighted piece here, and something about it feels to me contradictory with my previous statements about making sure that where we're developing is already developed land. And for instance, in my neighborhood, we have some cabins from the 1940s that up and down my street are being either added to or replaced with very large buildings that are, the original cabins are in the 650 square foot range. They're very tiny. and they have been replaced by 3,000 square foot houses. But we have a number of structures, not just those cabins, but other, ramblers and ranch houses that could be taken down because they're in ill repair. And we could put more duplexes in my neighborhood if we were to incentivize multifamily on a larger footprint. So something about this feels contradictory to my goals, and I'm having a hard time nailing it down beyond that. I think I just want to concur that I'm not comfortable with this, but I'm not sure how to recommend changing it.
Councilor Marshall.
And one other point to the process, the staff did take a look and the city attorney took a look. My language originally was like shall or will, et cetera, right? This very stuff. They're like, no, we need to like focus on making this permissive so we can encourage and incentivize. So that was the intent, to allow the flexibility through language, not mandatory, but to incentivize and look for ways we can get to that.
Any other comments or thoughts? Hello, Deputy Mayor.
I want to say that I hear our mayor and Councilmember Sassen's comments. And I keep trying to read this and I see that it is incentivized rather than must, or, it's not a direction limiting to that. It's just trying to benefit construction on previous building footprint. I'm a little ambiguous about this. I'm just going to say my stance, because it does have that, it's not a force or a hard decision or a hard ordinance there. But as the part that I most like in this is encourage reduction of impervious services. And that's the place that I feel like is most important, that's in the green. So the front portion, I understand where Councilmember Marshall is coming from, but also knowing how our direction as a council on housing, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm just gonna say that I think that it's incentivized. It's like, is there a way to do this in a way that limits expansion into unbuilt areas, right? Which is, I think, what, on that footprint. So encroaching on trees and natural lands is, I think, what the intention is, like some benefit to doing that. But in reality, we know that there are going to be houses that will go beyond those footprints, just especially like with Councilmember Sassen's description of the small houses where more needs to be built. So anyway, I hear all sides on this, but I think that the language keeps it open enough that people will be able to build what they need to build with that. Thank you.
Councilmember Shubnik.
Yeah, I'm hearing all the sides as well. And I just wonder, and I'll just ask Councilmember Marshall, I'm wondering if some language instead of that first clause, or maybe in relation to it, adopting development standards that promote compact, efficient creation of units that, where possible, preserves the existing building, or, works with the existing building footprint. I mean, I think we're all trying to get at not encroaching on new undeveloped land where feasible, while still creating units. So I don't know. I was just seeing if a change of language helps. I don't know.
I have a couple of thoughts that have come up, and then I'll go to Councilmember Sassen. One, I am worried about the effect this could have on construction of detached ADUs. And two, if we really want to get to dealing with impervious surfaces, we have regulations that require a 20-foot driveway on properties, and that is a whole lot of impervious surface that we are forcing on every single new development right now. So I'll just put that out there. Councilmember Sassen?
Yeah, I would just propose starting this at encourage reduction, and for me, do away with the first sentence. Because it is problematic for me.
You want to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make that a motion.
Second the motion. Remove the first clause ending, starting that section at encourage reduction. Is there any discussion? Deputy Mayor and then Councilor Marshall.
With that, Councilmember Sassen, did you mean with removing the word new? So encourage reduction of impervious surfaces without new in the sentence? To me, it's a small distinction, but I wanted to make sure that it was clear that we were asking for that change in that sentence.
Introduction of the first couple words makes sense.
Yeah,
Adopt
so-
development standards that, and then drop down encourage reduction.
Yeah, encourage reduction of new, rather than encourage reduction of new impervious surfaces, just encourage reduction of impervious surfaces. Just want to know that I don't want to make an amendment to change it. I just want to make sure I understood the sentence.
That's okay. I need you to say it again.
Yeah, I think what she's proposing is remove the word new after encourage reduction of. So just encourage reduction of impervious surfaces rather than encourage reduction of new impervious surfaces.
And eliminate new.
All right, is there? No, we're not lost. I'm just trying to figure out how we get to where we're hoping to go without, jumping through 5 hoops. Yeah, I'll take a motion to eliminate the word new.
So moved.
A second. Any discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that brings us back to Councilmember Sassen's original motion, which was to change language to adopt development standards that encourage reduction of impervious surfaces, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any discussion on that? Councilor Marshall?
Yeah, and this may procedurally throw it complicated just slightly, but I like Councilmember Lutz's suggestion about the footprint. So if my intent was, as everybody I think recognizes, trying to make sure that we don't go into or to try and incentivize remaining within the existing cleared areas, which I think we're all agreed upon, but Councilmember Lutz had more flexibility that might be successful in that. So perhaps instead of voting it down now or whatever we do, we could he could work on some language to that if he doesn't have it right now and bring it back next time.
You have a motion in front of us, Councilmember Lutz.
No, it was kind of off the cuff there as making a comment, but it's something that that there's interest in and could work through it a little more. But honestly, I think, just the moving away from limiting to the existing footprint. Yeah, anyway.
All right, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, clerk, would you please take the roll?
On the motion to amend the statement highlighted in green to read, adopt development standards that encourage reduction of impervious surfaces and evaluate opportunities for in-kind or financial contributions for neighborhood sidewalks and or stream protection plans. Councilmember Lutz,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes, the motion passes 6-1 and is adopted. Do we have any further? That brings us back to our general discussion. Do we have any further discussion on just the housing and land use elements? Councilor Marshall.
And I apologize on that. Did we all have consensus to have Councilmember Lucis come back with a proposal for that first clause of the sentence of the policy we just voted on.
I don't think we did. I'm just looking at folks, not seeing a lot of interest, Councilman Marshall. Any further discussion on the housing and land use, Councilman Marshall?
Yes, I appreciate staff for everything that got incorporated from my suggestion. There was one part that I think is important to bring up from the history section. I think it's important that we try to, be as accurate as possible in what we're conveying in terms of the history. Let me see if I can find this thing real quick. And that would be in housing element H3, line 33. It mentioned something to the effect of single-family housing, keeping out those of lower income. Quite true, but it's also true that many working class and middle class families did live and continue to live in single-family housing. I think we've got to have that. Otherwise, we're misrepresenting single-family housing and the history in it. So I had that in line 33. It would be insert. While many working class and middle class families lived and continued to live in single-family housing, and then go in with the rest of the language.
What page were you looking at? I'm
Yep,
sorry.
Yep, that's H3, line 33.
H3 doesn't have a line 33.
What should? Hang on a sec.
H3 has population, has like two charts.
H3, yeah.
Yeah, H3.
Oh, one sec. Let's see. I thought it was H3, line 31. It's in the description of housing. It's the real historical section of it. Let's see. Forgive me, I'm gonna look it up here real quick. It was in the great part about the covenants they mentioned. Okay, all right. I guess it's, okay, page 180 of 264 is one way to look at it.
Oh, that's in the packet, which I don't. Anybody happen to know which page that is in the element?
Draft housing element. Yeah, I've got H23 in the bottom right and page 180.
23?
H20,
2-3?
2-3, yeah.
Let's see too, yeah.
There's a big green section also about racial
Yeah, I see
covenants.
that.
Okay, so it's just above, the paragraph above the racial covenants says 2, widespread zoning of areas exclusively single-family housing is kept out, those with lower incomes, et cetera. I would propose to put in right at the beginning of that sentence before, or no, right after 2, while many working class and middle class families lived and continue to live in single-family housing, and keep the rest of the sentence.
Is that a motion?
That's the motion, looking for a second.
It's a motion, okay. There's a
Can
second?
someone clarify where we
Just
are?
want to, yeah, I'm just trying to, for
Sorry,
some reason,
it's-
I'm not seeing it, so
It's
I want to, yeah.
H23, H23.
Of the clean version? It's
I'm
not.
not looking at a clean version. I
Oh,
think the one
okay.
he's referring to is the one with the markups. Because I'm looking at something here, that yellow
Okay.
underlines. And
Is in the packet. I mean, where it is in the actual agenda item, that would be helpful for those.
I mean, that's what I'm looking at right now. It says H23, but there's, I think, 2 versions of it on there. If you do a find, if you do a search for a history of racially discriminatory, that will likely bring you to the right.
If I could ask the clerk to please bring up attachment number 2, and it
Please,
would be page 62 of the edited version of the housing element.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett.
Stand by.
So it's the
There we go.
starting on line 12.
That's right. Thank you. Thanks all for your patience.
Okay, just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yep.
I'll second that.
All right. Clerk, could you read back, once we've all gotten there, could you read back what exactly the motion was?
I can't. I was about to ask you what the motion was.
Okay.
Counselor Marshall, could you read your motion to
Yes,
the record again?
to add the language to, while many working class and middle class families lived and continue to live in single family housing. And then it continues widespread zoning, et cetera.
And to add that language where exactly? Line 12?
Line 12.
After 2. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I'm not seeing any discussion. Clerk, take the roll on the amendment.
To add the language, to while many working class and middle class families lived and continue to live in single family housing on line 12. Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver. Not
Absent.
present.
Yeah, not present.
Mayor Herbig.
No. So the motion passes 5-1 and is adopted. Anything further that we have on the housing and land use section? All right. And I think, thank you very much for everything, Ms. Bent.
Thank you. We will incorporate those two comments and then we will be bringing back an ordinance on December 9th, adopting the housing element and all the other elements. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to our second public hearing of the night, proposed ordinance 240618, final 2025-2026 biennial budget presented by Finance Administrative Director Belinda Merrill.
Good evening, Council. This is our last public hearing on the budget for 25-26. This is pretty much the same presentation that you've seen before, so you will get another chance to ask any questions related to this that maybe you didn't get to before. So we are going to look at the proposed biennial budget, hear public testimony, and then the ordinance will be up for adoption. So the policy direction that we follow is that the budget needs to support and implement the city council goals. And we also consider the results of the service level budgeting that we do earlier in the year. The goal is to have a balanced operating budget that utilizes a conservative approach to both revenues and expenditures. We want to maintain a positive financial forecast that meets our reserve policies and including any financial sustainability plan measures that we deem appropriate. So this is our budget of all funds for 25 and 26. So it includes obviously the general fund and then all the other funds that we have in the budget, and bringing us to a grand total for 25, 26. This is revenues of 89,658,368. So each year is around 42 to 47 million. For the expenditure side, again, all of the funds are listed here. And then the proposed total expenditure budget is 111, so $111,024,995. If you recall, we talked about this last time. Why is there a discrepancy between more expenditures than more revenues? The big difference is the Public Works Operations Center, which we're going to be spending all the money that comes in from the bonds and that money we've previously received earlier this year and in prior years. So those dollars will start to be spent down. So they're sitting in fund balance. And then there's some other areas where we are spending capital dollars in excess of revenues brought in, and that is because they also have fund balance we can use. So we have three main components to our operations. So our operating revenues and expenditures, which includes our general fund and the street fund. And I have an asterisk that the street and enterprise funds do function as operating funds, even though they're not, like our enterprise funds are not included in our general discussion about general funds. And that enterprise fund is our surface water management fund, where we have a lot of operating costs going in and out. Other funds that we have, special revenue funds, debt service funds for our bonds, and internal service funds such as our equipment replacement fund. And then, of course, we have our capital that we bring forward every year with our capital improvement program. And those funds are the transportation, parks, surface water, Public Works Operations Center, and then some other resource funds such as our impact fees, the REIT funds, real estate excise tax funds, and the bonds. This graph shows you the breakdown of our revenues and where most of our revenues come from. So of course, the majority is our property taxes at 36%. And then next after that is sales tax, and then utility tax and so on. But our taxes obviously are our main source. Franchise fees are only 5%, and then just some other areas that are smaller. So as I mentioned, significant revenues. The property taxes for the biennium are estimated to be about 12.5 million. That is our largest ongoing revenue source, and it's 36% of our revenues. The tax levy increase, which was brought forward last meeting for 2025, is going to be $202,842. Using some bank capacity, and that tax rate will be 0.77 for $1,000 of assessed value. Our sales taxes for the biennium should be a little over 9 million. It's our second largest ongoing revenue source and 26% of our revenues. And then utility and other taxes, a little over 5 million, third largest revenue source. And that those monies come from electric, solid waste, gas, surface water, cable, cell phone, and telephone. And I believe I mentioned last time that the city has done a really nice job actually of diversifying those revenue sources and building up some sources of monies coming from the utility and other taxes, and not just relying on property tax so much. Other operating revenues that you'll see in the general fund and street and surface water. So the operating funds, we do a capital overhead reimbursement that comes from surface water. And we have plan review and land fees, about 1.4 million is expected. Our franchise fees, just under 2 million. And then some permit revenue dollars of about 1.2 million. That's what's anticipated. In the street fund, we are anticipating fuel tax revenue of 756,000, the transportation benefit district fees of 1.4 million, and right-of-way permit fees and inspections of $250,000. Our surface water charges should be just under 10 million. So what are our major operating costs? And these are 2-year costs. There was a confusion last time, but it really is 2-year costs. So our salaries and benefits are 15 million. Our police contract is just under 10. Jail, court, some other police costs are 1.4 million. Our legal services costs are 900,000. Our insurance is over 1.6 million. Utility costs 1 million, and human services contributions and arch contributions, $778,000. So $30,359,000, $458. That is 74% of the total operating budget for the general fund and street fund. So those numbers combine general and street fund amounts. That total budget amount is $41 million for the two funds over 2 years. So position adds or modified include a new business and community engagement coordinator. That is 1 full FTE, a 1.0 FTE budget manager, 1.0 public works manager. Those are new. And then increasing a building official position to 1.0, increasing the permit coordinator to 1.0, and then adding a new engineering inspector and civil engineer that will be partially funded out of the general fund. So those each will have 0.25 in the general fund and then partially in transportation capital or CAPE. We also have included in the budget an increase of 3.6% to our salary ranges for 2025. And just as a budget placeholder, a 5% increase in 2026. And we're also just averaging an increase of 5% in the benefits. So this is a chart you've seen before. These are all the positions that are impacting the general fund. So you see mostly positive numbers. There's a couple of negative numbers. One negative is because there's a duplicate staff person listed in the budget. And then also 50% related to the executive assistant because we're reducing that position to half-time. So the total impact to the general fund for these new positions impacting the general fund is $854,625 over the biennium. So these are how those funds outside of the general fund are, how they impact the other funds mentioned. So there's an engineering inspector that hits the transportation capital fund and the CAPE fund. As you can see there, the civil engineer again is hitting the transportation and the CAPE fund. And then not on the other sheet, because it did not hit the general fund, is two positions related to Lake Point. So a capital project manager and a senior planner, which is a 2-year limited term position. And those will come strictly out of Lake Point. So here's the full list of all position changes. So all the changes to general, the impact to the capital fund, the Kenmore Automated Photo Enforcement Fund, and the Lake Point Fund. So the total impact over the biennium is just over $2 million. You've seen this before. These are the capital costs related to the 6-year plan for CIP. And then this chart just shows you the 2 years of the capital project costs. Look, there's $43.4 million anticipated to be spent, which of course depends on certain aspects of the projects that sometimes gets pushed out. But for right now, we're anticipating the $19.67 million for facilities. That's for the Public Works Operations Center, $16 million for transportation projects, a small amount in parks. That's mostly for mitigation work, and surface water, $7.2 million. And then here's capital revenues. Again, the 6-year CIP plan that was adopted earlier this year. And here is just the revenues related to 25-26. Most of our funding is coming from state grants. We have some coming from REIT and from the Surface Water Management Fund some from CAPE, some from carryover dollars of money that was not spent in this fiscal year, and then some other sources there. So again, tonight is the final public hearing and potential adoption of the budget. On December 9th, we will bring forward the proposed 2025 salary plan with a 3.6% increase. Also some modifications to the salary ranges based on the salary study that we are wrapping up right now. So we're at the point where staff is reviewing our recommendations, and then we will bring forward that at the December 9th meeting. What questions do you have?
Questions before I open up the public hearing? I'm not seeing any. So with that said, same rules apply for the public hearing. Folks get 3 minutes. Direct your comments directly to the city council. We'll hear on-site guests first and then off-site guests. And I declare the public hearing open. Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 guests wishing to speak. Patrick O'Brien on site, followed by Stacy Valenzuela online.
All right, Pat O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. I would love to see a budget where they had Lake Point not included. I would love to see a budget where the maintenance facility was not included and how much savings there would be. There'd be considerable, considering when you look at this, you've got $15 million a year in salaries for staff. You've got 1.6 million for insurance. Legal is at 900,000. You wouldn't have had the legal bills had they not decided to side with the applicant for the dredging, let's say, and that had to be $250,000. I don't know what the figure was, but there was a lot more than one attorney working on that. And the city chose to take on the citizens when we wanted to have accurate testing for a number of things and have the study released to the public. You've got a card room capability. Nobody's ever talking about revenue enhancement outside of property tax and sales tax. You've got Lake Point. The cleanup of Lake Point is going to be billions, and you want to dive on that grenade for some unknown reason. Not only that, you want to spend money in the millions of dollars before you've acquired the land or even seen the testing of that property. That is robbery. That is a theft of public money. You don't have the right to spend money on property you don't own. You just don't. It's going to be an ongoing problem because you're looking to buy something that you have already spent millions on. Not only this, Lake Point has been going on for more than 25 years, and I've seen full drawn out maps of how they were going to develop it. And yet we're paying more than $1 million a year, $1.6 million a year to recreate a plan that's been done at least twice before. You people are in disbelief. It's unbelievable the money you're spending, and you're not holding this office accountable for the money that they are spending and what the budget would look like without Lake Point, without the old fire station being passed by in a secret deal with Rob Carlinzi and Sound Transit. That's going to cost us 30 million, 40 million, 50 million. I mean, how many times do we have to see the special interest and the behind the scenes money spending? You're not representing the people when it comes to this budget. You need to say, all right, we want to see the budget without the frills and without Lake Point, because you have no right to press forward on Lake Point because you haven't done a feasibility study that includes testing at levels that are deeper than a scoop sample, which Baker did. You need to do a full bore analysis. Thank you.
Stacy Valenzuela.
Hi, can you hear me?
We hear you. Go on.
Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. Has anything changed in the budget based on the residents' concerns that came forward to date? This is why residents no longer bother coming forward. This budget with 15 million going towards salary while additional hiring goes on, yet consultants are being used for most of the work? Ridiculous. First, we were informed that 3 million of the CCA funds would go to the sidewalks, not climate action. This budget also shows a 3 million for acquisition with consulting fees. Then next week consent agenda, or last week had shown another million for consulting fees yet again for environmental services. You also skipped over on the chart, but it shows that there's over 280,000 going towards parks. But 8 million was spent, almost 9 at one park, and over 2 to 3 million was spent at the other. So what are those actual charges? Are they again for the council members related clubs? Because it's very discerning that it constantly keeps happening that the clubs are being given millions of dollars over time when they need to be paying rent, they need to be covering the maintenance, and they need to be paying back the over $500,000 that was loaned by this in the strategic funds. I'm hoping that you will stop the debt going on. I'm hoping that you will hold the departments accountable to cut back like everybody else has had to in their budgets since the pandemic. There is no reason for it to be to this extent that people are being taxed and charged money for parks, for clubs. They should have a choice of which clubs they want to support, including the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, all these other organizations. It should be a fair policy. And we do not need more employees. We need employees to work better, smarter, and cut back on waste. Hope you will take this into consideration and change the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That concludes our speakers list.
Is there anybody else present wishing to be heard? Anyone else present wishing to be heard? Last call. Anybody else present wishing to be heard? With that, the public hearing is closed. Brings us to item B on our business agenda, proposed ordinance 240618, final 2025-2026 biennial budget. Presented by Finance Administrative Director Melinda Merrill. Anything further, Ms. Merrill?
Nothing further to add at this time.
Do we have any further questions for staff? Councilor Lutzis.
I just want to bring up a couple of things that were brought up in our comments from the residents that maybe we can clarify or give some more information on, if that's okay. I know I apologize, it might be catching you off guard, but they raised them and I want to at least make sure that they're heard. How much has the city I know you may not have the numbers up in front of you, but the city has been doing cuts along the way, right? With this budget. I know that there was a discussion several meetings ago in which we talked about that, as well as a lot of the cuts that the cuts that weren't as big to make it in, a lot of the smaller marginal cuts here and there. Could you speak on that about the city's work to do a lot of cutting?
Yeah, one of the things as part of the financial sustainability plan is our goal was to cut $100,000 out of our general fund budget. And when I pulled together the numbers that we actually cut, which was a very high level exercise. I didn't dig into every single penny and dollar, but I believe it was over $350,000 that we ended up cutting that I found easily. So we cut much more than what our initial attempt was.
Thank you. Another question that was brought up too was the amount spent on Lake Point. And I was curious, looking ahead at this next year, how much will the city spend of its own funds before the potential property acquisition? Is there any estimate on that? I know that's kind of vague, but I know that we've created a fund, but I also know when it comes to due diligence, we've received a lot of external grant funding. And so my recollection is that number should be relatively small before site acquisition.
I'm gonna let Rob speak to that.
I should have brought my budget book with me, but we need that. But it's not a small number of our own money, for sure. Yeah. If I'm to accurately answer your question, I'll need to go get my budget book. Oh, thank you.
I have mine too. I apologize for putting you on the spot.
No,
like
you're
this. I just
fine.
want to address
Yeah,
what was
let's see.
brought up.
Well, the city manager is digging through his budget book. Any other questions? City manager, when you get to that portion, could we also maybe, I just wanted to confirm that the funds that we're discussing for Lake Point are for feasibility, are for testing, are for ensuring, like making sure that a purchase there, that the land is usable for what we want to use it for. It just happens to be a much more complicated piece of land than, as the public mentioned also, requires much more complicated work to do due diligence.
I need to combine 2024 and 2025. You already adopted the 2024 budget amendment. We're about 3.9 million total. And that includes a deposit on the property. It includes consulting services and testing, legal services, community engagement, that sort of thing. So close to 4 million. And so far we have a $450,000 grant to help us with it.
In terms of, well, from this point until acquisition, though, it would likely be a lot smaller. But after we acquire the property, then a lot more of that allocated funding in the budget would kind of kick in.
After we acquire it?
Yes.
Well, so we do have a $7.5 million grant from the county to help us acquire it. That just got approved by the county council last week. But so far, other than that, that's all the grants that we have. We will be applying for grants to help offset all this, but we have not secured them yet. For example, we just recently applied for a $500,000 EPA brownfields grant to help us with these kind of costs, but we won't know for a few months whether we get that grant.
But I guess my point, not quite getting there. But say the due diligence doesn't pan out and everything, a lot of the budgeted funds and stuff would be reallocated, correct? Such as in the Lake Point Fund for the next biennium?
Oh, like unspent?
Unspent, yes.
True, yeah. I don't know how much will be unspent by then, but also another thing to note is we do have about 1.3 million of this being paid back should a ballot measure pass by the voters.
Thank you.
Councilor Sherman, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, and just remind me, if it does fall through on due diligence, the deposit. I mean, I'm just trying to remember the nature of the agreement. What happens to the deposit?
That's still under negotiation.
Okay.
It is a lot of money. And so the question is Lake Point important? And if you look at your principles of shoreline restoration, habitat restoration, parks improvements, economic development, all those things, and given that this is an opportunity to address all those things in a big way, is this important enough for you to be spending this kind of money? And before you can acquire property like this, of this magnitude, you do need to invest in testing and due diligence. It's just a fact of life. Anybody that would look at buying this property would have to do something similar. So yeah, it is a lot of money up front. but is it important to you and the community, and does it meet a lot of your principles and goals? That's for you to answer.
Any further questions? All right, the chair would entertain a motion to adopt proposed ordinance 240618.
So moved.
I will second. Discussion. Any discussion? All right, well, I just want to thank staff for all their work. I know that it was a ton of work, and I know that we say this every meeting, but we mean it. These biennial budgets are an absolute bear, and I can't imagine the nights and weekends that you put into all of this and getting us to this place. So I just want to say thank you very much. Any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to adopt ordinance number 24-0618, thereby approving a biennial budget for years 2025 and 2026. Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen. Is that a yes?
Yes, sorry.
Councilmember Culver,
No.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes, the motion passes 6-1 and the ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Next up, staff reports. City Manager.
Yeah, I want to congratulate you all for passing the budget, and also Melinda Morell and her team. You're right, Mayor, this was not an easy budget. It was a tough budget. I say that every time, but this was true this time as well. Many hours, burning the midnight oil type of hours, especially on Melinda's part. So, plus at the same time, she had other things going on, like getting the financial sustainability plan done, also getting the Public Works Operations Center bonds done, going out for a bond rating. There was a lot to juggle, and she and her team got it done. So pretty incredible, and just want to thank you and the whole city team publicly for that. So let's talk about last week a little bit. So you may have seen in our report, weekly report, that the storm last Tuesday night, the barometric pressure dropped to an estimated 942 millibars. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds like a lot. Clocking the lowest pressure in about 50 years of recorded storms in the region. My contact, Julian Lowe at Puget Sound Energy, he was updating both me and the mayor in real time. He did a great job on that. And his word that he used with me on the phone a lot was unprecedented. And so the storm happened on Tuesday. On Friday night, he called me like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I was in the movies, so I had to call him after the movies. We talked about 10 o'clock that night, and he said that there were over 1,000 open jobs for public work, for Puget Sound Energy to be doing, still to do with the storm. So like mostly just down trees and things like that, big and small. There were, as of Friday night, there were 90 big jobs still to do just in North King County. So it was a huge effort. They had 150 crews working, plus they were getting crews from other utility companies to come and assist. Our team, our Public Works team, went out right away and got roads cleared out where they could. If they were leaning on power lines, they did have to wait for Puget Sound Energy to come and get those before our crews could touch them. And I'm going to give you an example in just a second. But it really was a whole team of people coming together. We had to drop what we were doing and communicate with the public and make sure City Hall was up and running and all these things. I was really glad to see how well the team came together on that. From what I can tell, just reading the outage map and watching it in real time every day, Kenmore actually fared pretty well compared to the rest of East King County. while our big red blobs started disappearing, they remained for days in East King County, especially Issaquah, Sammamish area. And those are still where the most of the power outages are. They had to, I'm sure you know this, but they focus on the biggest bang for the buck first. So they go for substations, getting those up and running, the big transmission lines, getting those up and running, and then making sure things like hospitals and wastewater treatment plants and other essential facilities are up and running. And once they get those big blobs, big red blobs taken out, then there's just hundreds of these tiny little ones all over the place. And if you look up, even today, if you look it up right now, you'll still see lots of those little dots all over the county that they still have to address. So there, even as I speak right now, there's still people without power. And there are still people without power in Kenmore as I speak. But let me give you an example of one that happened just literally a block from my house. It didn't affect my power. But Michelle, if you could bring up a picture. So this is on 146th Street, almost near the Kirkland border. And that's it looks like one tree, but it's actually 3 big stems falling down and crushing there. And on the right, you can see where it's hitting the power line. So that was out all the way until Sunday afternoon. If you go to the next slide, there's a picture of the truck that it crushed. Next slide, a little close up there. So, so it was yesterday that Puget Sound Energy came and got it off the line. And so this morning, our crew was out there bright and early, and they got a wood chipper. And here's a picture from the other side of the tree, so you can see how much organic material is there. But our crew, after Puget Sound Energy got it, this is what our crew did. The tree was still across the road when Puget Sound Energy was done with it, and so our crew came in and used the wood chipper and cut up all the logs and got that stump off the truck. There's another angle of it. You can see the stump on the right side of the picture. So this was an all-day activity for our crew today. That's where they were spending their time today, is getting rid of all that organic material and getting the road open. And just think, if it took our crew that much time for that one incident, multiply that by hundreds across the county. So that's all I have. I think Julian Lowe might be able to come and give us more of an after action update at an upcoming council meeting. Stay tuned on that. And that's all I have, Your Honor.
All right, that brings us to council reports. We're gonna start off with the piece that we added to the agenda last week, Councilor Shrubnik's 3 facilitators of deeply affordable housing. Councilor Shrubnik, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, and I want to provide a little context that I probably should have last time too. The reason I brought this up is I had conversations with a couple of legislators recently, and of course this topic, among many others, came up, and I realized I was expressing my opinions, and I didn't know whether those were, I was expressing them as just myself in those conversations, but I realized I was unclear whether I could express them as positions of the council versus me as an individual. So I would have the same question going forward. So I wanted to bring these forward for that reason. And as you know, I'm deeply committed to development of deeply affordable housing, and have wanted to get back into that conversation ever since we left it in January, and am looking forward to doing that in short order in 2025. So, so that's the context, and the 3 points, holding local government, I think accountable is the word, for results, not process. In other words, production of affordable units, deeply affordable units in particular, rather than process. You can, zone all you want, and of course, that's a necessary condition. But zoning alone and regulation alone won't provide, it won't result in deeply affordable housing. That takes a lot more than simple zoning and regulation. And paired with that, and in order to do number one, you have to do number two. A piece that I've, I think many of you know my background, but I've done a lot of work in metric development and quality improvement. And it always rubs me a little bit wrong when you have targets that literally everybody knows are not achievable and are very transparently not achievable. And people talk about them in those terms. Everybody from local government to county government to state government folks. And so when that happens, the process of people actually trusting targets and working towards those targets, in my opinion, is eroded when the targets are transparently infeasible. And so I fully understand that these are representations of need at those levels, and that we all agree that need outstrips any ability to achieve in the 20-year time horizon of comp plans. And that is very, very unfortunate. And I don't think there is anyone in any level of government or any development circles that has remotely said the 0 to 30 targets are realistic or achievable. And that is, so I would really like to have actual targets for planning purposes that local governments and state government could agree we should be actually holding ourselves accountable to, so that we could track our progress and see that we are actually starting to meet targets. And then the last point is just developing a funding pool to support. It's actually the operations piece of affordable and supported housing forms that are more varied instead of the large 100-unit buildings. There is, of course, money for the capital side because that's a little different. That's a one-time expense, of course, amortized. But it's the operations piece that starts to become very, very challenging for supported housing developers to work with in the existing funding structures, because you get economies of scale when you start to build larger. So that's the background from these three. And I am not wedded to this. I told you the context in which it occurred. So, I mean, however we fall on these is I fully with everybody, and just wanted to kind of express the opinions and kind of see where we were at.
All right, discussion. Deputy Mayor.
I appreciate Councilmember Shrevenick's context for bringing these forward. I personally feel comfortable with being able to speak at the levels that you were proposing on these items. And I think that it's important that we be clear as to whether this is a council supported direction, or if we want to just keep it more limited to the framework that we have documented. So, I'm curious what others think, but I'm supportive of being able to use this language as a framework for speaking about housing. Thank you.
Councilor Sassen.
Two things. One, I feel gratified for your deeper explanation, which I don't find to be adequately reflected in the words in front of me on the agenda. So if I'm going to be in support, I will need more words. I also, which I find might not 100% sure that this is the right way to move forward with this. I know that we have a council planning commission housing study session that is Ms. Bent is putting on the schedule for January. And I wonder, are we in a hurry to make this decision, or could this be a conversation that is an aspect of that study session?
I don't know the answer to that, Councilor Marshall.
Yeah, and my position is the same as before. I favor local autonomy. I think that we're getting too much erosion in terms of the whole push for what the state level sees as proper for the local community. So I wouldn't support the first two items, but the last one, I think there's no harm in that at all, to develop a funding pool, whatever that means, for new options.
Councilor Lutzis?
Yes, just a couple of comments on a few of these points. I think with point number 3, that's also a direction that the state is already heading. So I don't think that that's too controversial, at least from what I've sort of picked up about developing a funding pool based on the comments Mayor, you made at, I think, our last meeting. For the first one, about holding local governments accountable for results not processed. And also, I think, to the point of Councilmember Marshall, which I think overlaps here a lot about local autonomy too, is when I first heard this, it made me think back to my intro to public policy course at the UW, and how it's, well established that you can have better governance, more effective and efficient governance at localized levels when you have networks and trust and the people working together to address these large issues. And so, I think there may be some discrepancy on interpreting the first point as whether or not that's reaching into the local level. But I think overall, just when it comes to addressing these and the processes at which we tackle these things, a more localized approach often is better at assessing the localized needs and environment of the situation.
Speaking only for myself, I just, like I said last week, I oppose us having this discussion at this point, because we've already had our discussion around legislative agenda, and I wish that we would have hashed that out there, but that's just me. Any further comments? Councilor Culver?
Thank you. I've got quite a few. First, just for transparency, I think let's make sure to get the entirety of these statements published before, if we do adopt them, again, just for transparency. Second, I like the idea of getting this in front of our advisory groups, Planning Commission, and the Housing and Human Services, or whatever the group is called. Absolutely. I would love to hear their feedback on this. Thirdly, just a lot of comments, hoping to set some context for the public, just for a full understanding of this. I do appreciate the effort on some of this kind of creative approach and advocacy. I do want to clear up some disconnects. I feel like I'm hearing this, and just make sure, again, the public has good takeaways. First up, holding local government accountable to results, not process. That sounds kind of good and tough and actionable, but we should be clear that our process is not delivering results. Kenmore first adopted its affordable housing strategy back in March of 2017. And nearly 8 years on now, we have 0 units of permanent supportive housing to show for it, and 0 PSH projects in the pipeline. Our results do not have much leg to stand on. Secondly, the lack of public investment is not the issue. The state understands the crisis we're in and has put up $4 billion in the last 4 years alone. Kenmore, of course, got a generous share of it too. Approximately $30 million in state funding, which council rejected twice. Third point, different form factors are fine, but they're less financially feasible. Big buildings are the most common because Most funders and stewards of public dollars aren't likely to sign on to less efficient alternatives. But I don't think we should hold our breath that Kenmore will be cutting to the front of the line for, say, special Victorian unit funding anytime soon. I think we have probably used up that political favor. The reality is that cities are the choke point right now in getting more affordable housing built. The state knows this. It's why they are putting us through the barriers to production exercise, with more of that surely to come. Take, for example, this past year, HB 2474, the Kenmore bill. State law already prohibits cities from rejecting STEP housing projects outright. This bill just closed a loophole when cities reject a project based on siding requirements, so setbacks, parking, density, et cetera. For those instances, the bill enshrined a new mitigation process through commerce, which is cheaper and more efficient than fighting it out through lawsuits. So it's still giving cities the opportunity to lead until they choose not to. I think most residents would agree that setbacks and parking should not get in the way of providing a human with a place to live, much less 100+ humans, and evidently the state concurs. HB 2474 was introduced late in the short session and passed the House in less than 3 weeks with supportive bills from both of our House reps. It stalled in the Senate, but it's getting reintroduced. Even so, Commerce started offering this mitigation process earlier this year to help affordable housing projects stay on track, so it's not going anywhere. It is not the first intervention from the state to get more affordable housing built, and by all indications, it will not be the last. Because let's remember, folks, although Governor Inslee gave quite the series of barn burner speeches and talking tos, it's Governor-elect Bob Ferguson who is the absolute machine on government efficiency. With that context in mind, my concern is these anecdotes saying certain developments don't fit, encouraging the state to aim smaller with its goals, and some cherry picking of the historical record. Taken together, it comes across just defeatist and doesn't convey to our lawmakers that Kenmore is a serious and committed contributor to this group project. Most cities have moved away from planning-oriented local control messaging and toward a more collaborative building-oriented language, including the Association of Washington Cities. I think we should too. What does more serious message leadership look like? From the cities that are getting it done. Bothell says, the city requests the legislature to continue to take bold action to eliminate barriers to housing construction. Redmond looks forward to continuing to share our expertise in the statewide dialogue on the affordable housing crisis. Redmond is a statewide leader in inclusionary zoning. Redmond's long-standing inclusionary zoning regulations apply to most areas of the city and have contributed to the creation of 1,127 cost-controlled affordable housing units. So I think even our current statement as it stands is problematic. I don't see a path to revising them to build better outcomes, I think. I think it would just give more indication to the state that they do need to step up. So I've taken up enough air on the topic, but a lot of context there. So there we go.
Deputy Mayor and the Councilor Shrevenick.
I think the intention is, or, the question is where our council stands. And because of our experience from last year, we have lessons learned. Legislative session has not begun yet, and we would like to be able to provide advice or comments to our legislators to say, these are things that we see that we would like you to advocate for, if you can put them into your housing plans for this year. If we want to just leave it as is, that is fine. But I think what Council Member Shrevenick was bringing forward was there's some nuance here. Do we want to, I do think multiple funding sources for multiple housing types is incredibly important and something that would truly benefit small cities like Kenmore. And if we can't speak to our experience and ask our legislators to look for more ways of funding things that would meet smaller communities like our needs for affordable housing, then, it is what it is. But I think we're essentially asking, are these things that we as a council are in agreement on as a council, or are they personal views? And I think we're okay with whichever direction our council chooses to go, but that was the intention behind this. Is our council aligned with, in particular, the one that I'm most passionate about is ensuring our representatives know that, you know, we need more types of funding sources for smaller scale housing units. That's it. You know, we're going to still see the 100-unit and larger units, of course, but what about finding other sources, what smaller scale housing that would fit better in our community at this point in time as we are growing? So session's coming up, decisions haven't been made. How do we want to talk about this issue? We've got it on the paper of what we've given to our lobbyist. It looks pretty good, but is there more breadth and depth that we as a council want to be able to speak on? And if we do so in those areas, would they be personal views or council views?
Councilor Shrubnik?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's certainly on 1 and 2, not a consensus or a majority that are comfortable with that. That may be coming more from my personal background of metrics and accountability. It always frustrates me when metrics are put out there and people lose faith in them. But it seems like maybe there was a little more traction with understanding that a funding pool for operating costs that are higher than the standard very large developments might be something that there is a little bit more traction on.
Any additional comments? I'm not sure how to proceed right now, just to be clear, just to be, upfront with everybody. Do we have a motion? Do we have consensus? I don't believe we have consensus.
Well, it's not really a motion. It's basically, I mean, I think, we all talk to legislators. I mean, this is probably it's the first time in my 6 years that anyone has actually asked for permission to raise a policy nuance as opposed to just doing it. So I don't know that we need a motion. I get the sense that people are generally favorable of a variety of affordable and supportive housing types, and how we get there is, one way is to make sure we have funding that supports those.
I don't think that's inconsistent with her.
It's not, well, none of these are inconsistent. So, it's all, again, trying to get to how do we get there? And again, number 1 and 2 is trying to develop a system that all cities, not just Kenmore, can be accountable to. The more well-off cities and cities with higher property values, as well as cities with more modest property values, where affordable housing can be more easily built. But I sense the discomfort with 1 and 2, and that's fine. But I mean, is there anybody, radically opposed to 3, I guess?
Is there any opposition to 3?
Could we just read 3 in for the record?
Develop a funding pool to support a variety of deeply affordable and supportive housing forms. It's on the agenda.
Right, but the agenda didn't have sort of the longer explanation.
Well, that's not what we're not talking about, a longer explanation. We're literally just talking about the sentences on the agenda, Councilmember Culver.
Okay. That's 3 times, I guess we won't get it.
Councilor Sassen.
Just to speak, yeah, I'm against it.
Councilor Sassen.
I see the words of number 3, and when you talk about it, Councilmember Shrubnik, you add the word operating expenses. And so I would like the operating expenses to be included in that statement.
Yeah,
Because to me,
that is
feels
clarifying.
essential.
Yeah,
If we're going to move ahead in any way, I just need that to be more clear.
And yes, it was actually city manager, when we had a conversation earlier today, he said, do you mean capital or operating? And I was like, oh, yes, that's what we're talking about. So I'm sorry, I hadn't been clear about that. So let's.
Is there any opposition then on the dais to folks adopt, generally agreeing to point 3 with the addition of operating funds?
Just to be clear, I'm against, yes.
Okay, so we have 1 person against that, Councilor Marshall.
maybe just an explanation as to my probably future view or my understanding of supportive housing or my understanding of how I want it to go. I think I'm okay with that language. My interest in supportive housing is going to be for sobriety. It's going to be that we need to have better staffing for supportive housing. We need to fund that for sure. I don't believe that we're being served by simply allowing people to use in housing. However that works out. Needed to say that. Thank you.
I'm only seeing one person opposed to us essentially not adopting, but I guess agreeing that point 3 is within our bounds when we're discussing things with legislators. So, Councilmember Culver.
Thank you. 1 second here. What a week it has been. A very trying week for many community members. Folks who had to throw out food or lose medicine or couldn't plug in assistive devices, internet, etc. I want to thank the frontline crews who worked hard to get our power restored. Those folks deserve all of the gratitude and appreciation and grace. And also, Puget Sound Energy is a monopoly and monopolies are bad. It's tough to reconcile. This past week's storm is unprecedented when outages have been a recurring disruption in Kenmore for decades now. As the only council member who voted against re-upping our 5-year franchise agreement with Puget Sound Energy, and also made the case at this year's council retreat for building a more resilient renewable power grid, we know these are entirely preventable, and I wonder how many outages we are going to put our community through before we change course. Lastly, I do want to echo Deputy Mayor O'Kane's recurring council member report topic, Free Palestine. Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
It was great to see the City Hall offering a warming and technology station. I went down there myself, I think it was Thursday. So it was great to see people making use of it. And I think yes and no, I mean, maybe good and not so good that it wasn't overly crowded. Don't know if more people didn't know or more people didn't need it. And certainly we've got people today, I guess, who are still without power, which is definitely concerning. I also want to thank Councilmember Culver because I think he was not only using the solar power for his charging, but you were offering some.
Yes.
Yeah, offering excess. He had his own little solar unit out in the courtyard. I think he was offering to some people. So that was great. And in the spirit of volunteerism for all our citizens who, as I was looking around online, people who were looking out for their fellow citizens, helping everybody out, that was amazing. I just have to remark that it doesn't do too much good for the people who are still without power. But I remember when my first child was born in 2005 or 6, my dad still lived up here in Inglewood. And he was like 70 something at the time, and he was not in the best of health at all. And the power was out for at least a week, I think 2005, 2006. It was right, at least a week. And it was cold. It was cold temperatures. And somehow he stuck it out, but it was only through our efforts of going in, looking in on him and bringing him everything. I can only imagine what other people are going through. I think there is some improvement that we all have seen with the new franchise agreement. And that was due in no small part, and the main impetus behind that was Nancy Ousley. And that's an amazing stride forward with new infrastructure from PSE and new standards from PSE, a bunch of details like that. We should still look to improve even more, I think, somehow, some way, and with PSE and perhaps thinking about coordination of emergency services. I don't know what people do when you're going paycheck to paycheck and you lose your refrigerator and everything you've just bought in your fridge, and I don't know what would happen, but it's amazing that people have endured. So some thoughts. Thanks, everybody.
Councilor Sassen.
I appreciate everything that's been said about this recent big dark. I appreciate that City Hall was open for people, and I really appreciate all the big and little ways I saw our Kenmore residents reaching out to each other as neighbors with cleanup efforts and offers of refrigeration and power charging and all kinds of great things. I do want to really encourage people to, who are connected on social media, to please follow the Kenmore Facebook page. I think that there are the official city Facebook page for updates from the city. I saw some criticism that the city was doing nothing, but I think that those people just needed to go to the right source. So I also want to just make some comments about the long dark, the winter dark. One of the gorgeous things that happened during the COVID pandemic was more people started walking. And in my neighborhood, people are still walking after work, and they are dressed like I am in black. And they are, I don't have sidewalks in my neighborhood. And I just want to call to people's attention that reflective outerwear really works, and that here at Kenmore City Hall, you can pick up a free reflective vest. That's still true. Yes, City Manager? Yep. Please come by and pick up a reflective vest, because there are at least a dozen people who walk on my street wearing black after dark. And I would like you to not do that anymore, please. I would also really like to remind people to turn their headlights on when they're driving. And I would also lastly like to remind people not to run red lights. All of these things cause me terrific distress. So I would like us to show up for each other in the big dark. Thanks.
Councilmember Shevnik.
Yeah, I want to thank city manager and city staff for opening City Hall. It's was great. And really, I know many of us lost power, but man, I think we've forgotten how bad it used to be. I mean, I remember the fateful years of, losing power 10 times in the winter, several of those for no obvious storm reason at all. The fact that we lost power when 650,000 people also did isn't really troubling to me personally. This was a big one. And it was not fun, but we were all together in it and everybody working as hard as they could. And it's a lot better here than it used to be those dozen years ago. I think we're almost getting spoiled that we haven't lost power here in so many years, that it was a little bit of a shock, but it's hugely improved compared to where we were a dozen years ago.
Councilmember Lutsis.
Yeah, just picking up on that, we lost power too. I think everyone probably lost power up here. And so we felt the effects of those too, and we were not certainly removed from that. And I did want to point out, just as some of my colleagues have said, and recognize those residents in our community who stepped up and helped their neighbors. It's a warming thing to see when that happens in times of need, and it certainly revives that hope and humanity in those difficult times, especially thanks to the crews who worked day and night to restore power across the city. And then thanks to city staff and our city manager for opening up City Hall as a warming station and charging station. I think just looking at the future and what we can learn from this, maybe thinking about how we can get the word out during times of power outages. It might be hard to relay that message over social media if power is out and people don't have their devices because it's off. So, or at least trying to diversify how we can send out that message citywide, whether that's through the use of the NEMCO text alert, or maybe more physical signage out on the street or something in front of City Hall. But then bringing that back really quick, I did want to quickly recognize our city staff and those behind the budget for all of their time and effort, because this was a huge lift. So thank you, especially to our finance director and those on her team for all that they did to bring that together for us. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I want to echo everyone's comments about City Hall. I drove by with my kids in the car on, was it Wednesday night? And we saw the lights on and the people being served. And my kids were actually really proud. They're like, what's going on at City Hall? And it really made me thankful that we're here for our community, and staff came together and provided support for our Kenmore residents. So bravo, it was really just a great surprise to drive by light in the dark of Kenmore, and it felt really good. And then I do just, want to call attention that last Thursday, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, the two Israeli leaders, though not certainly the only ones principally responsible for the ongoing genocide in Gaza. I'm calling this out for a reason. According to the judges in The Hague, there are reasonable grounds to believe that each man bears criminal responsibility for the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare and crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts, including the intentionally directing of an attack against the civilian population. I call this out because our nation, which we are a part of, is materially funding this war, this genocide. And the least I can do is state publicly that I stand for an arms embargo, an immediate arms embargo to Israel, for a permanent ceasefire and a free Palestine, a peaceful Israel and Middle East and world. We, the American people, need to be aware of what's happening. Here we live in the beautiful city of Kenmore, where we experienced a few days of darkness, but we were able to be served efficiently as possible. And we are going to have safe Thanksgiving. We here have so much to have thanks for. And so as we go into this holiday season, I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Let's open our hearts and we've got a lot going on in the world. So just open your hearts to the highest good that we can possibly achieve in the near future. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, I just want to recognize, I just took a look at the PSC outage map, that there's still 201 households in Kenmore that I could find by poking around at the various things on the map that are still without power. And, we're in day 6 now for those folks. And I do want to recognize how incredibly difficult that is. I only lost power for about 44 hours maybe. And that was hard enough. So I just want to let them know that those folks are my thoughts. And I know that PSC is doing what they can to get those resolved as quickly as possible. It is markedly different though than it was a few years ago. Not to defend a giant multinational corporation, but they have done quite a bit of investments in Kenmore, and our outages have gone down quite a bit. I had one year where I tossed my fridge, I think 3 times. This year I will toss my fridge once, and my fridge is wonderfully clean right now, which is a nice thing. But our outages have gone down quite a bit. This was a once in a generation sort of storm that came out of the blue. And well, I understand it was difficult. It's not, like Councilmember Sharpnick said, unforeseen that, that people would be hit, and it's difficult, and there's not enough resources on the ground to deal with something that size, essentially a hurricane coming through. There's no way that a company could have the folks that needed to get things stood up as quickly as anybody would have liked. I'm still without internet because whatever electricity is serving some Ziply piece of infrastructure is still not is still out of power. I do want to thank the city for stepping up. I think next time we know something like this is happening, we should try to stand up the next day instead of 2 days. But I totally understand it was an idea that popped into somebody's head probably, and it was a great idea. And I think that's something that we file away for next time. Because I know I was charging on my phone and at work. hoping that my phone would then have enough battery to wake me up in the morning. But yeah, I want to thank the community for coming together and working together to get through this. And again, just keeping those 201 families that are still without power in my thoughts tonight. And hopefully this will all get resolved in hopefully the next few hours. So I don't have anything else to add. So with that, we are adjourned.